The deeper you go, the creepier they get. You're about to travel to the darkest ocean depths and check whether this claim is true. Are the creatures living there as scary as people think? You go 120 feet down underwater. Pay close attention to the bottom under your flippers. Oh my, what's that terrifying face half hidden in the sand? That's the northern stargazer. You can meet this fish in the eastern United States. It buries itself in the sand until unsuspecting prey gets near. Then, the nightmarish creature electrically shocks the poor animal and dines on it. You are moving deeper to 240 feet under the surface. That's where you spot a colorful, puffy creature, no more than 1 foot long. It's the sarcastic fringehead. At first, the fish seems to be harmless. Only unless it's provoked. When this animal is agitated, it opens its huge mouth to fend off predators. This defense tactic is a sight to behold, both surprising and frightening. Luckily, the fish is no threat to people whatsoever. The creature you see next can comfortably live in shallow waters, but you meet it at a depth of 900 feet. You don't even need to wonder why the animal's called the Game of Thrones brittle star. Unlike starfish that slowly crawl across the seabed, this creature moves fast. It wriggles its long, flexible arms to get from point A to point B. Its body is protected by a hard calcium carbonate shell. Also called snake stars, these creatures are tiny and easily fit in nooks, cracks, and small crevices in rocks. At a much greater depth of 2,000 feet, you come across the giant squid. For a long time, it was thought to be a creature from legends rather than a real animal. The giant squid was first caught on camera in 2001, and it's exactly as big as its name implies. The creature's eyeballs are the size of soccer balls, and the squid itself can weigh up to 600 pounds. Almost 3,000 feet below the surface, you get spooked by another creepy-looking animal. It's somewhat red and rather small, no longer than 1 foot long. As you approach the creature, it looks rather docile, or maybe just indifferent. The vampire squid, that's the animal's name, looks like an umbrella with tentacles. It doesn't even produce ink, so you leave it alone. Soon after that, at a depth of 3,200 feet, you meet the cookie cutter shark. This creature is a parasite. It attaches itself to big fishes, dolphins, whales, and sometimes even people. Then, using its neatly arranged serrated teeth, it gouges out cookie-sized pieces of meat. This nasty glowing animal doesn't grow larger than 20 inches and lives in the ocean twilight zone. At a depth of 3,300 feet, the light becomes a rare and valuable thing. The animals living that far away from the surface have to evolve unusual features to survive. That's how the barrel-eye fish ended up with a transparent head and 2 super-sensitive barrel-shaped eyes. Right now, pretty much like always, they're pointed upward, allowing the fish to see potential prey and you. Almost 4,000 feet below the surface, you see something droopy and saggy. The blobfish doesn't have a skeleton or any muscle. Its jelly-like flesh lets the creature survive incredible water pressure. Despite its appearance, the blobfish is an ambush predator. It usually lies very still on the bottom, waiting for unsuspecting prey to swim by. You go a bit deeper and spot a creature that looks particularly ghastly. The goblin shark senses prey with its snout. The creature's terrifying jaws are attached to elastic ligaments. When some animal comes too close, the shark catapults its mouth forward to catch it. If your mouth could do the same, you would be able to eat things dangling 7 inches away from your face. Even deeper than that, at 5,000 feet, you notice another member of the shark family. The frilled shark looks like an overgrown eel, but its gills are lined with red fringe at the edges, hence the name. The creature's horrifying mouth has 25 rows of razor-sharp backward-facing teeth, 300 in total. The shark prefers to hover in the water, waiting for its prey to come closer. Then, it charges at it like a snake. Suddenly, you see something glow brightly like an electric bulb. But after coming closer, you recoil in horror. The creature looks like an upgraded eel equipped with oversized teeth. That's the deep-sea dragonfish that can live at a depth of 6,000 feet. Chemical processes going on inside the fish's body produce an eerie red glow. This glow is used to communicate with other fish. At the same depth, you meet another deep-sea inhabitant. Its most prominent feature is its huge mouth. Thanks to it, the gulper eel can swallow its prey whole. Its stomach can expand to a terrifying size when it needs to fit something large. At a depth of 6,600 feet, you come across an angry-looking creature with a fishing rod over its head. It's the deep-sea anglerfish. The animal has an unusual dorsal spine, even though it's worn only by females. It protrudes above their mouth and has a lure on its tip, some luminous flesh that baits prey. The anglerfish has such a big mouth and its body is so pliable that it can swallow animals twice its own size. You're 7,000 feet down when you see another fish that's glowing in the dark. The black dragonfish is a sly creature. It has its light-producing organs arranged along its belly. The spooky creature also has gleaming flashlights next to its eyes. They help the animal find prey and attract potential mates. At the same depth, you also spot an enormous pill bug. But unlike the critter you can find in your garden, this one is at least 20 inches long. That's the giant isopod, and it is, indeed, related to the roly-poly, as well as crabs and shrimps. These creatures may look somewhat scary, but they're harmless. They feast on other deep-sea animals only after those have passed away. At a depth of 13,000 feet, you notice the ocean floor has become a bit fluffy. That's because it's covered with zombie worms. These creatures rarely grow to be more than 2 inches long, and still, they can break down fairly large animals, so strong the acid they produce is. The worms' feathery appearance makes them look like plants, but the truth is, these creatures munch on rock-hard bones of the world's largest animals, such as whales. The grid-eye fish almost scares you out of your mind soon after that. This creature has a pair of large greenish oval plates on the top of its head and no eyes whatsoever. Experts believe that these bony membranes detect light coming from predators, saving the fish's life. You're now 3 miles down below the surface, and that's where you spot something bizarre on the bottom. It's definitely a fish, but it's standing on the ocean floor on 3 long, rigid legs. Ah, it's the tripod fish. Curious rather than scary. This creature has adapted to the almost complete darkness by giving up on its vision. It has to rely on vibration and touch to sense prey. And then, the fish uses its fins as hands to transport food directly into its mouth. You don't have time to go any deeper before you spot the faceless fish. This slightly off-putting creature has no eyes, and its mouth, smiling a Mona Lisa smile, is underneath its body. For the first time, the faceless cusk, which is the creature's official name, was seen more than a century ago. The next time it happened was only in 2017. Once you've reached a depth of 6 miles below the surface, you see deep-sea cucumbers. These bizarre creatures are much bigger than their shallow water relatives. They spend most of their time on the sea floor. But if they need to escape predators, they are able to swim away. Deep-sea cucumbers have bright purplish coloring, tiny feet, and tentacles that surround their mouths. Cute. The question is, why do these deep-sea creatures look so scary? Life is very different there, at the bottom. Tremendous water pressure, a lack of food, and constant darkness. You have to adapt to survive in such extreme conditions.
There is a place deep in the ocean where pressure is 1,000 times stronger than that we're used to at the surface. This force is enough to turn an unprotected human into dust instantly. Well, maybe more like mud. Anyway, that's why explorers need some serious preparation and equipment to survive in such extreme conditions down in the Mariana Trench. It is as wide as 20 national malls in Washington, D.C., and about 1/5 as long as the diameter of Earth. People who went all the way down describe it as a chilly, quiet, and very peaceful place. They saw a bright blanket of red and yellow rocky outcrops, and there was a whole variety of unique, small, translucent animals. The popular myth is that more people have gone to the moon than to this deepest place on Earth is not true, though. In total, 24 humans flew to the moon, and at least 27 brave souls dove down to the Mariana Trench. Most of them were explorers and not proper scientists. They just go there for the thrills and also to collect video evidence of different wildlife, geological formations, and human-made objects. Humans started traveling around space and into the ocean depths at around the same time. The first moon landing was in 1969, and the first person to go down the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, did so in 1960. This unusual location got its name after the British ship HMS Challenger, which first located this massive drop in the ocean floor at the end of the 19th century. It would take 8 more decades before the first human went down to it. Explorers didn't manage to do it in a conventional submarine. They used a type of submersible called a bath escape. The Swiss oceanographer Auguste Piccard designed his own in 1953. 7 years later, the submersible managed to do the impossible. It had reached a depth of nearly 36,000 feet. But what explorers saw was merely a fraction of the trench's full size. The fact that it is so huge of the Mariana Trench is just one of the reasons why it's mostly unexplored today. The absence of light is another major issue. Sunlight is incapable of reaching such profound depths, so the entire trench, from top to bottom, lies in absolute darkness. Because of such conditions, the ecosystem is a lot different than the shallower regions of the Pacific. This puts immense pressure on marine wildlife. Yeah, the pun is intended. Another reason why it's so challenging to survive there is the temperature. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the ocean is just a couple of degrees above freezing. One of the factors that hasn't let this area turn into a giant icicle is the fact that salt water has a slightly lower freezing point. The other reason is geothermal energy that warms the ground at the bottom of these just enough for it not to freeze. That's why submersibles need to have proper insulation to navigate these icy conditions. When they reach the bottom, researchers find out that this desolate and harsh climate is home to several animal species. They encountered arrow-toothed eels, snailfish, and spoonworms at various depths. There were even strange-looking translucent sea cucumbers and shrimp-like amphipods. The biggest surprise was microbial mats thriving on methane and hydrogen from the mud. Among the species, the Mariana snailfish looks like a master of the environment that can go farther and deeper into the trench to feed on prey than its competitors. Despite its seemingly fragile appearance, the snailfish has adapted to withstand extreme pressures, a superpower it wouldn't be able to survive without. The exotic life forms that live deep down aren't normal-sized, since deep-sea gigantism makes them grow significantly larger than their counterparts in other ecosystems. One example is the giant tube worm, which can be 6 feet long. Science has a hard time explaining the exact cause of this form of gigantism. Thermal vents are just one of the possible explanations. All of these factors might help explain the huge time gap in researching the Mariana Trench. The first successful dive after the 1960 expedition came only in 2012. That's when the famous Canadian film director James Cameron went down in the deep-sea Challenger. Because few scientists have gone that deep before or after Cameron, there is no map of the deepest point on our planet. We know very little about the oceans that cover 2/3 of the Earth's surface. Researchers have mapped out only 5% of them so far. Science still has a lot to discover in the Mariana Trench and other unexplored places on our planet. The Amazon rainforest stands as the best example of the world's most unexplored regions. The list of reasons why this part of South America is unknown starts with its wildlife: jaguars, anacondas, piranhas, black caimans, and Brazilian wandering spiders are just some of the creatures that pose a risk for researchers. Relentless year-round rainfall induces heavy flooding. Add to all this some treacherous river currents, and you can see why scientists have mapped such a small percentage of the Amazon to date. In just one region of Brazil, near Peru, there are at least 14 tribes that have never had contact with the outside world. The national authorities intend to keep it that way. Isolation of these indigenous people is the best way to protect their future. The same goes for a remote island in the Indian Ocean. After the tragic tsunami of 2004, helicopters flew over North Sentinel Island to make sure its inhabitants were alive and well. Meanwhile, the Sentinelese weren't thrilled. They took up bows and arrows to drive away the unwanted visitors. This tribe is one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. Although anthropologists and filmmakers visited the island in the late 1960s, we still don't know much about its indigenous population. It sits a long way off any shipping lanes in the Bay of Bengal. North Sentinel has no natural harbor, and it's surrounded by a shallow reef. This makes access to the island possible only by boat. The Indian officials who lay claim to the island have prohibited outsiders from visiting the island for safety reasons. The estimates on how many people inhabit the island vary significantly, from as few as 15 to as many as 500. The island is not tiny. It's about 5 times as big as London's Heathrow Airport. Apart from occasional contact during the past 2 centuries, the Sentinelese must have been isolated for a long time. They are related to other indigenous groups in the Andaman Islands, but their neighbors cannot understand a word of their language. The continent of Antarctica has no permanent human settlements at all. The only people who periodically live there are international scientists. This vast expanse of ice and snow, roughly the size of the United States and Mexico combined, still has many regions where humans haven't set foot. Satellite imagery and photos that NASA's aircraft made from the air have mapped out the entire continent, so we know where to go, but it's not that easy. The reason for this are all the adjectives that go with Antarctica. It is the coldest, windiest, driest, and brightest of the 7 continents. This makes it virtually unlivable. More than 99% of its surface is covered with a permanent sheet of ice. Its thickness ranges from 1 mile to as many as 3 miles in some places. That's half the height of Mount Everest. Now, the Himalayan range contains the world's tallest unclimbed mountain. It is also the tallest mountain in Bhutan. In the local language, the mountain's name translates as White Peak of the 3 spiritual brothers. Out of respect for the spiritual beliefs of the local population, national authorities restricted and then completely banned mountaineering at the beginning of the 21st century. To this day, there is no evidence that any climber has ever managed to successfully reach the summit of this mysterious mountain. Can you swim? Good. Because you're going on a journey to the deepest point of the Pacific Ocean. Now put on your flippers. The very bottom of the Mariana Trench is awaiting. Now get in the water. Really, come on. All right. 1 foot underwater. That's the depth you can swim with no special gear like a mask. Hey look, must be some tourists. Or whales. 10 feet underwater. That's a little deeper than the public pools and beaches around the United States. You can see colorful fish and even phytoplankton that feed on the sun's rays. 26 feet down. This is the depth at which the foundations of the floating city of Venice in Italy stand. Builders laid columns at that depth on which they later built houses and streets. 30 feet underwater. You start to feel a lot of pressure. When you're on the surface, you're under atmospheric pressure, 15 pounds per square inch. But here, at 30 feet, that pressure is doubled. All the air pockets in your body, like your lungs or ears, begin to compress from this pressure, giving you discomfort. But no worries, your organs are soft and elastic, so you can keep diving. 40 feet underwater. Oops, you're running out of air. An average person can hold their breath for 30 to 90 seconds. The current record is an incredible 24 minutes and 37 seconds. Gasp. Okay, you'll need some diving equipment to continue your descent. There you go. Thank you very much. Tourists dive to this depth to look at reefs and corals. You don't need special skills for that, but you can't dive any deeper without training or a license. 45 feet down. Be careful, there's sharks swimming here looking for food, like you. Sometimes tourists descend to this depth in a safe cage to see the sharks up close. You're better off staying away from these predators and not attracting their attention. So make sure you're not wearing any bright and shiny jewelry. Sharks love that kind of thing. 62 feet underwater. You could see the Aquarius Reef Base Lab in Florida at this depth, if you were in Florida. It's really an entire building with rooms for exploring the seafloor, accessible through a hatch. 105 feet down. You see a strange bell hanging from a chain. People used to use these things for deep diving about 400 years ago. They'd lower a bell on chains with divers inside from a ship. There was enough air inside the bell for them to breathe. That way, they could explore sunken ships with treasures. 140 feet. At this depth, you could find an entire sunken city in Qianda Lake, China. You can still see streets, houses, and temples there. 330 feet. Whoa! You almost hit a huge blue whale. How could you miss it? These guys, the size of 2 train cars, usually dive to that depth. Shh! Let's listen to them sing for a while. It's beautiful. Now, let's keep going. 660 feet. This is where most of the ocean life ends. Sun rays hardly penetrate any deeper into the water. Everything below are unusual fish like this angler. They have such an unusual appearance because they have to adapt to the high pressure here. 702 feet underwater. This is the last mark where you'd see a human without diving equipment. This man holds the title of the deepest man on Earth, and he's the only one who has managed to get to this depth. The water pressure on his body here was 20 times greater than that on the surface. 985 feet. Ooh, what was that sound? Whoa, that's a submarine. That's the maximum depth they can dive to. Some of them can reach speeds of 26 miles per hour. Fun fact, an ostrich can run twice as fast, but she can't swim. 1,090 feet. Say bye to this scuba diver. You won't see them any deeper than this. The world record was set in the Red Sea. It only took the diver 12 minutes to reach this depth, but it took him a whole 15 hours to return to the surface to avoid decompression sickness. So now you get an atmospheric deep diving suit. It's completely sealed, and you won't feel the insane water pressure on your body in it. 1,454 feet. If you stuck the Empire State Building in the water, its tip would be here, and all the carpet inside of it would be wet. 2,300 feet down. The water pressure here is 70 times greater than on the surface. The flexible plastic parts of your suit can't withstand that kind of pressure. So here's some urgent delivery. It's an ultra-deep submersible. Now you can continue your dive all the way down. 2,717 feet. Here you'd see the tip of the tallest building on Earth, the Burj Khalifa. All right, who's sinking all the tall buildings around here? 5,387 feet. This is the depth of one of the oldest and deepest lakes in the world, Lake Baikal. Its area is slightly larger than the entire country of Belgium. 8,040 feet. That's the record depth the Perdido oil platform reaches in the Gulf of Mexico. And its above-water part with 3 decks is almost as high as the Eiffel Tower. 11,962 feet. This is the average depth of the Atlantic Ocean. You can see a huge tube as wide as a giraffe's neck. And it just seems to be endless. True, this cable connected Europe and North America and used to serve for telegraph communications. 12,303 feet underwater. Suddenly, in the darkness, you see the outline of a ship. No way! That's the Titanic itself. The intense water pressure would crush a person at this depth. So you can only dive down to the Titanic in a submarine. 13,123 feet. Whoa! Here would be the end of the deepest mine in the world, Imponen Gold Mine in Africa. But you still have deeper places to go. Let's speed up. 20,000 feet. Here you can see the deepest debris of an old ship. The USS Johnson sank more than 70 years ago. You can still clearly see the number 557 on its bow. 26,200 feet. Here, in this total darkness, you'll find the deepest fish in the world, the Mariana snailfish. They're as long as a domestic kitten and have almost transparent skin. Their eyes are poorly developed for vision because the sunlight never reaches this deep. 29,030 feet. If you take Mount Everest, flip it over, and stick it into the Marianas Trench, this is exactly where you'd see its tip. Even though this is the highest point on our planet, you'd still have a lot deeper to go. 35,755 feet down. Here, in the Challenger Deep, you'd still see life. You'd need a microscope for that, though. Bacteria living here feed on organic molecules, similar to oil. A little deeper? Congrats! You've touched the bottom. It's 36,070 feet deep. The pressure here is 1,071 times higher than on the surface. But you're not the first person to have been here. One of the last expeditions to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was in 2012. An American filmmaker descended here in a submarine he designed himself. But the pressure broke some of the engines, so it was hard for him to maneuver here. The sonar was also damaged, and some of the batteries drained. He was in the Challenger Deep for about 3 hours and took many pictures and videos. If you look closely at the bottom itself, you can see bubbles. It's carbon dioxide and liquid sulfur. It's freezing here because of the extreme pressure and temperature close to freezing. But there's still life here in these harsh conditions. The 3 microorganisms are most common here: xenophytophores, amphipods, and small sea cucumbers. There's so few of them because they don't have enough food down here. Usually, there's a lot of palm leaves on the ocean floor, which get there from the land. But the Mariana Trench is 124 miles from the nearest islands. So the only food here is old plankton and fish scales from the ocean's upper layers. But it needs to travel tens of thousands of feet to become food for the bottom dwellers. But can you go even lower into the crust of the Earth? Well then, you'll need to unleash your giant drill and fire up the jet engines. You're pushing another 36 miles through the Earth's crust, and here is its edge. You've entered the upper mantle. It's an ocean of hot lava, 1,800 miles deep. You have to literally swim through this, reaching the outer core, another 1,400 miles deep. Then you reach the inner core, another 755 miles, and congrats! You're at the very center of the Earth. I hate to ask, but how do we get out of here?
If you could dive right into the mysterious darkness of the ocean depths, who knows what you'd come upon? Legends that are hundreds of years old mention some giant sea monsters hiding deep down below the ocean waves, like the Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, the Hydra, Leviathan, and so many more. Okay, no one has ever seen such monsters, but there are still weird and unusually big sea spiders, squid, worms, and many other animals that grew way more than we'd expected. Take a look at the colossal squid from sub-Antarctic waters. It's around 14 times longer than the arrow squid that lives near New Zealand. And deep down in the Pacific Ocean, there's a sea sponge as big as a minivan. Oceans contain about 96.5% of all water on our planet. Up to 80% of all life on Earth we've discovered is under the oceanic waves. We haven't explored, mapped, or even seen more than 80% of the ocean. In fact, we've mapped Mars better than we have the ocean bottom. The pressure down there is insane, and it would make you feel like you're holding up almost 50 jumbo jets. And temperatures at such depths are extremely low. Conditions deep below the oceanic surface are harsh, so creatures that live there need to adjust. That's why many of them grew very, very big to survive. Creatures that live in cold, dark depths are so big because of a phenomenon called deep sea gigantism. The deeper you go below the oceanic surface, the less sunlight there is. That's why the temperatures drastically fall. The result of this is increased cell size and longer life of creatures. Also, these creatures don't have as much oxygen as the marine animals that live in shallower parts. and their food sources are minimal. Much of the food they get comes from shallower waters, and only a little bit trickles down to the deeper parts. And when there's not enough food, being large is an advantage. Larger creatures can move farther and faster to find something to eat. Their metabolism works slower. They don't digest the food that fast, so they can store food and conserve energy for hard times when they can't find anything to eat. They don't need to regulate their body temperature either, which also helps them save some energy, which they can then transfer to other body processes. They mature more slowly and later than those living in shallow waters. The majority of fish species that dwell in deep waters live 30 years or even more. Orange roughy fish, on the other hand, live up to 150 years. This fella grows 24 feet in length and weighs up to 1.5 tons. But it grows to be so big for centuries. They start looking for partners when they're 150 years old, and they can also live this long because there are not so many predators at such depths. Also, there are no humans or other things that can disturb them or endanger their existence. At such depths, the environment is pretty stable, so many animals there are like living fossils, because they probably haven't changed in millions of years. The first 650 feet of the ocean's depth are considered to be the open ocean. The majority of the marine life we've discovered lives there, since that's the area the sun can still reach. And then, as you continue going deeper, you reach the twilight zone. It seems like nothing lives there. But at about 820 feet, you see a small oasis of ancient life blooming. For example, there are sea lilies, animals that have been living at such depths unchanged for millions of years. Coelacanths, another living fossil, have been living in the ocean for more than 360 million years. Hagfish haven't changed in a very long time either, for over 300 million years. This creature lives at depths of 5,500 feet. They evolved before the rest of the vertebrates, which is why this is the only living animal without jaws or a spine, even though it still has a skull. Deep-sea creatures can't survive in shallow waters. They've evolved to live in depths under bigger hydrostatic pressure. Humans and other organisms that have internal spaces filled with gas would end up crushed if we could go to such depths. That's why deep-sea divers always need to wear special dive suits designed for surroundings with higher pressure, even though they're not going that deep to the areas where these giants live. But near Antarctica, you can see gigantism way closer to the surface, like giant sponges, sea slugs, sea spiders the size of a dinner plate, worms, and even some enormous single-celled organisms. They all tend to chill in shallower waters. Scientists are not sure why exactly, but they think it could have something to do with oxygen. Giant species use just a little oxygen, and the waters around Antarctica are pretty rich in it, which means there's hardly any limit to these animals growing bigger and bigger. Back to deep-sea creatures. As mentioned, they had to adjust to strong pressure, so they almost don't have any air gaps in their body at all. They're mostly water-based, and since water is incompressible, which means it's not something you can compress, it helps them stay unaffected at such high pressure. But because of all that, if they were to go up towards the surface, they'd probably swell up, maybe even explode. Just look at the blobfish, the one that takes the title of the ugliest animal in the world. It looks normal deep down below the surface, where its natural habitat is. But when it gets up to the surface, where the pressure is 120 times lower, it changes its shape. The blobfish doesn't have a skeleton or muscles, so without high deep-sea pressure, it ends up being all floppy and saggy. The dark oceanic depths are not just scary to watch, but to listen to as well. In 1997, scientists were trying to find underwater volcanoes located off the South American coast. During their travels, they recorded one of the loudest noises ever registered. It was pretty weird, too. It was so loud, even sensors from more than 3,000 miles away managed to pick it up. They later called it the bloop. It took them 15 years to conclude the sound came from an ice quake. That's when seismic activity breaks frozen ground. Water at the bottom of the ocean is not always extremely cold. There are hydrothermal vents on the seafloor, and the water that comes out of them can be up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Powerful pressure, yep, the same one that would crush you, is something that doesn't allow the water to boil. There are hundreds of animal species that live near deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Some of them, such as tube worms, are not like anything we have seen before. These worms absorb chemicals from vent fluids. That's how they feed bacteria that live in them. And in return, those bacteria give them the carbon the tube worms need to survive. 2/3 of all of the coral species scientists discovered live in dark, deep, and extremely cold parts of the ocean. Some even live in parts that are 3 miles deep. They can survive at low temperatures, such as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of these cold water corals are more than 8,000 years old. They form amazing structures that can rise up to 115 feet tall. The deep is not just a mysterious world of unusual creatures. The landscape under the oceanic surface is magnificent too. The canyons hiding there make even the Grand Canyon seem small. For instance, check out the one located in the Bering Sea, the Jemchug Canyon. Its vertical relief is more than 8,500 feet deep. That's huge. The largest ocean waves are not the ones you can see from the shoreline. They occur under the surface, and they're called internal waves. They take place between two water masses that have different densities. They travel at speeds of thousands of miles per hour and can be 650 feet tall. It's one of the most intriguing locations in the world. Covered in darkness and miles underwater, this extreme environment is home to some unusual creatures and phenomena. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest oceanic trench on Earth. No wonder it's been so difficult to explore. Because of the risky conditions, people aren't able to explore this location without proper equipment. But what would happen if we threw a steel ball down there? Let's start with some basics. How did they first discover this enormously deep hole in the ocean? HMS Challenger identified it back in 1875. The ship had some pretty fancy sounding equipment for its time, but it wasn't nearly good enough to be able to fully explore the trench. Some decades later, in 1951, another ship, the HMS Challenger II, came back to the location better equipped. The vessel featured an echo sounder and was able to take accurate measurements of what seemed to be the deepest point on the surface of our planet. If you were to look at it in 2D, you'd see the trench measures 1,500 miles in length and 43 miles in width on average. It also looks sort of like a crescent-shaped scar when you observe it from above. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, right? Well, if you were to stretch a wire from the surface of the ocean to the trench's deepest point, it would measure a staggering 7 miles. If we were able to physically move Mount Everest, which is the Earth's tallest mountain, to cover the Mariana Trench, it still wouldn't be enough, falling short by about a mile. Because the Mariana Trench is so deep, it's almost completely covered in darkness, as light can barely get through to such extreme distances underwater. The temperature isn't any friendlier either, just a few degrees above freezing. But the most dangerous feature of them all is the water pressure. Right at the deepest point of the trench, the amount of pressure is about 1,000 times higher than the standard atmospheric pressure. Not a lot of people ever attempted to descend into the Mariana Trench. In fact, the first organized attempt took place more than 60 years ago. It was done by Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh in a submersible. They only spent about 5 hours on their descent and a mere 20 minutes at the bottom. Alas, they weren't able to take any pictures. Until these two scientists were able to descend, specialists believed there was little to no chance that life could exist down there, given the conditions, most notably the extreme pressure. But while at the bottom, the submersible's floodlight caught sight of a creature. It was a very flat one indeed. As you can imagine, resources here are very scarce. What kind of creatures live down here? And how do they survive? given the harsh environment. Surprisingly, there is quite an abundance of wildlife living in the Mariana Trench. Some of these creatures fall back on chemicals to survive, like methane or sulfur, while other kinds of fish nibble at the marine life that's, well, weaker than them on the food chain. The most common creatures found here are xenophyophores, amphipods, and small sea cucumbers. Some of them adapted by hardening up their shell using aluminum harnessed from the seawater. Smaller creatures, like microbes, adapted by feeding on the chemicals emitted when the seawater hits the underwater rocks. They consider the Mariana snailfish the rock star of the area in terms of wildlife. They're small, ranging from 3 to 9 inches, translucent, and lacking any scales. But they're the top beast of prey in the area. It's no wonder some people started to believe that the ancient megalodon might still be living here. What was a megalodon, you might be wondering? It was the largest predator ever known in our planet's history. Basically, the biggest and nastiest shark ever to have lived. Scientists believe it's been extinct for quite some time, and the idea that it might still be hiding in the Mariana Trench doesn't have a lot of supporting information. The megalodon would have needed to learn to navigate in complete darkness. It would either have to be bioluminescent or evolve to have massive eyes. More so, because of its school bus-like size, the megalodon would have needed a lot to eat. Microbes and small snailfish just wouldn't have done the trick. If a steel ball were to be dropped in the trench, what would be its effect on it? Would the ball be strong enough to sustain such pressure? Let's look at the science here. If we assume it's a solid steel ball, the pressure found at the bottom of the trench wouldn't be enough to really affect it and cause permanent damage. It would take it a solid 12 minutes to reach the bottom of the ocean, though. What about the temperature? Well, it turns out that the difference in temperature on the surface and at the bottom of the trench is quite impressive, a difference of about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So, it would cause the ball to shrink a bit, but yet again, once the ball returns to the surface, it would simply come back to normal. Should the ball get stuck there, there's another interesting question to answer. Would corrosion affect it? Corrosion of steel is highly dependent on the amount of oxygen in the water. The amount of oxygen dissolved in water remains constant at depths greater than 3 miles. I'll spare you the math, but it would take more than 10,000 years for the steel ball to completely rust under the sea. I can't help but wonder, though, what would it take us humans to be able to survive at such extreme depths? Let's look at what was used in the past to explore this mysterious location. A little thing called syntactic foam. Why? Because it's the only material that can both float and resist the amount of pressure found here. Without this sort of protection, our lungs would rapidly collapse here. More so, the pressure from the water would push liquid into our mouths, replacing the much-needed oxygen with water. Then, there would be the much-needed ability to be able to come back to the surface should anything not go as planned. One of the vessels that went for a deep dive here had 1,000-pound steel weights attached to it, so it would ensure its sinkage. These weights were connected to the ship by a special type of wire that had an increased corroding time of 11 to 13 hours in seawater, just in case something went wrong down there, and they'd have to bounce back faster. Given the harsh conditions here, the problem of oxygen supply is really important too. Any vessel looking to descend into the Mariana Trench again would need to consider some sort of device that can recycle the air in order to reduce the amount of oxygen that needs to be transported down there. And the last, but definitely not the least of all problems, would be electricity. There surely isn't a power socket down there for you to charge your phone. So, there needs to be enough battery life to support all the necessary equipment, communication, oxygen supply, lighting devices, and so on. None of these problems seem to be quite the challenge anymore, since, as of recently, you can buy a tour of the Mariana Trench. 3 lucky individuals were part of such a project back in 2020. They were submerged in a 3.5-inch thick titanium sphere. This ensured that they didn't feel any pressure changes and physiological stresses whatsoever. Each of the guests took part in an individual trip that had an estimated length of about 14 hours. The descent itself took over 4 hours. Once they reached the bottom, they got the chance to witness some of the most extraordinary creatures on the planet. Then it was time to start the 4-hour ascent back to the surface.
Now, the Mariana Trench is the deepest and probably the most enigmatic place on Earth, whatever that means. Bizarre creatures such as deep-sea anglerfish, frilled and goblin sharks, barrel-eyed fish, hatchet fish, live in a crescent-shaped trench in the Western Pacific. Just 3 people have ever descended down the Challenger Deep in the southern end of the Mariana Trench. There, at a depth of almost 11,000 feet, vents are bubbling up carbon dioxide and liquid sulfur. Mud volcanoes erupt under the pressure 1,000 times greater than at the surface. And so, it's no place I want to go. So bye!
Get back in there.
Alright, since you clicked, yeah, you're about to visit places no less mysterious and creepy than the Mariana Trench. Your first stop is Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula to be precise. See those bottomless sinkholes filled with crystal clear water? It's fresh water that overlies salt water seeping from the sea. The sinkholes are called cenotes. The Mayans believe these natural wells were the gateways to the underworld. Thousands of cenotes, created by collapsed limestone bedrock, form one of the world's longest underwater cave systems. You can easily get lost in this tangled, mysterious network. Now it's time to visit the Caribbean. There, you'll get to a depth of almost 8,000 feet to see the Van Dam vent field. The hydrothermal vents fire out streams of muddy, scalding water with a temperature reaching 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost enough to bake a pizza. These mounds are made of talc, a substance you can find in baby powder. The Van Dam vent field is an oasis for odd species. One of those is kind of a creepy shrimp without eyes. Instead, they're equipped with patches of light-sensitive cells on their backs. Now, you don't have to travel far away. The next enigma on your list is also in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there is a giant sinkhole. It's also blue. Yep, that's the Great Blue Hole. The thing is about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long time ago, this hole was a cave until rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it becomes. You see tons of stalactite-filled caves, but don't even try to enter them unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you notice the water shimmer. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. Time to get out of there. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths? Your next destination is off the Pacific Northwest coast. Almost 500 streams of methane bubbles were discovered there several years ago. Because of the bubbles, the vents got the name champagne seeps, which sounds better than the fart spas. Scientists are still puzzling over this phenomenon. Where does the methane come from? Underwater cows? Why is its temperature warmer than that of the surrounding ocean? And most importantly, what would happen if you managed to light a match somewhere near a large bubble? Methane is a highly flammable gas, and setting a methane bubble on fire, well, you get the picture. And now you're off to Iceland. The plan is to dive into Silfra, a fissure filled with pure glacier water. This 206-foot deep crack is the only underwater place on the planet where you can touch 2 continents at once. The deeper you go, the darker it becomes. The rocky landscape looks otherworldly. Divers who dare to visit this incredible place risk having their gear frozen, getting hypothermia, or not surviving whatsoever. After all, the water temperature in Silfra Fissure is about 35 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Your next destination is Scotland. Okay, cue the bagpipes. If you dive in the Gulf of Corryvreckan, a narrow strait between 2 islands, you'll see massive underwater rocks and deep holes. They create the 3rd largest permanent whirlpool on the planet, the Corryvreckan Maelstrom. The water moves through the strait at breakneck speed. It hits the underwater rocks, and the place looks like a pot with boiling water. The waves, created in the process, sometimes reach a height of 15 feet, and you can still hear the roaring whirlpool from 10 miles away. It's believed the Corryvreckan maelstrom has swallowed dozens of sailors over the centuries. They were caught unaware by the ferocity of this natural phenomenon and pulled underwater in the blink of an eye. Okay, enough bagpipes. Your adventures are getting more and more extreme. You're heading for Antarctica. There, in the Southern Ocean, you'll find the Ross Sea Ice Shelf. Say that 5 times real fast. Later, not now. It's roughly the size of Spain, with the ocean underneath containing as much water as the North Sea. Once, scientists drilled all the way down through this enormous chunk of ice. Imagine their astonishment when they found life in those extreme conditions. The researchers came across dozens of mysterious species not known before. The most unnerving were upside-down swimming fish and overturned sea anemones hanging in the frigid waters. Hopefully, bizarre places with a notorious reputation don't frighten you. Well, too bad, because you're about to visit the Bermuda Triangle. It's an area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to vanish in thin air. For the first time, this place attracted a lot of attention in 1945. That's when 5 U.S. Navy planes disappeared during training. Before radio contact was lost, the flight leader said, "We're entering white water. Nothing seems right." After that, the planes with 14 men flying them disappeared. Even scarier, a rescue plane with 13 people on board never came back as well. Some people believe the mythical city of Atlantis lies at the bottom of the triangle. They claim its inhabitants use extraterrestrial technologies to sink ships and crash airplanes. Others blame rare and unexplored natural phenomenon, for example, magnetic anomalies, or massive pockets of flammable methane gas. There we go again. Then, if a bolt of lightning ignited a giant methane bubble near a ship or a plane, this could probably make it sink without a trace, except the smell. But methane is found everywhere all over the world, and it never behaves this way. Some experts aren't sure there's a mystery to explain whatsoever. Lots of busy routes pass through this area. No wonder more ships and planes sink there than anywhere else. Now, prepare some warm clothes. You're heading for the north again. Your destination is Cape Desolation in Greenland. Nice place. In 2012, Canadian researchers were sampling the water in that area, and their equipment came back to the surface with pieces of coral attached to it. That's how a cold water coral reef was stumbled across. These unique pinkish corals can easily go without sunlight and live in strong currents 3,000 feet below the surface. Another unique spot you can't miss lies between Greenland and Siberia. The Gakkel Ridge is the deepest and most remote portion of the global mid-ocean ridge system. In some places, it reaches the depth of more than 3 miles. It's only natural the darkest corners of this underwater world remain unexplored. Fascinating chemical reactions happening at the bottom of the ridge produce hot fluids rich in minerals. They spew, like freshmen at a rush party, from seafloor vents. And since these vents are isolated from the rest of the ocean, they're hot spots for bizarre creatures found nowhere else in the world. Your next stop is just off the coast of Cuba. Circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. What happened there? Why was a large city abandoned at a depth of more than 2,000 feet? Lots of people believe those are the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. The disc and donut structures often appear around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Again with the gases. When you come to visit the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, you won't find its shores. Instead, it's surrounded by powerful ocean currents. These are the same currents that turn the sea into a gigantic convention for dense brown seaweed. In the 19th century, a French ship was discovered in the Sargasso Sea. Its sails were set, but not a single crew member was on board. This mysterious disappearance made people believe the seaweed was carnivorous. The Sargasso Sea is indeed a weird place. It's always eerily calm and unnaturally warm. even though it's surrounded by the churning, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Could one of these bizarre places become a home to the largest marine predator ever, the megalodon? The giant shark's teeth, some larger than an adult man's hand, have been found pretty much all over the world. But since these creatures preferred warm, shallow waters, they lived along the coastlines of all continents except Antarctica. In other words, it'd be a waste of time to search for the giant predator in the depths of the Mariana Trench, in Greenland, or in Mexican cenotes. But then, could it choose the waters of the Caribbean to hide from the hustle and bustle of the modern world? Don't get your hopes up. There's been no proof the megalodon does exist these days. It wasn't a shy, elusive animal, and still, no one has seen this shark lurking around recently. Not even near the fart spas.
Hello, Brightsiders! Do you know where the deepest place in the world is? I think it's in the Pacific Ocean, near the Philippines and Papua New Guinea. It's the famous Mariana Trench. So let's take a tape measure, a very long one, and attach its end to the boat on the surface. Now we hold our breath and jump in the water. Fish and marine animals swim by. We descend lower to the depths and into total darkness. And after several hours, we reach Challenger Deep. The tape measure shows a depth of 36,200 feet. The famous Mariana Trench is not the deepest place on Earth, as everybody thought. The Kola super deep borehole located in Murmansk region in Russia beats it by a wide margin. And scientists have discovered something unusual and sinister there. When geologists were drilling the hole, they could reach the depth of 9 miles. And then they encountered voids. Scientists on the surface were surprised and scratched their heads and then decided to lower a microphone and dozens of other sensors in these voids. The temperature down below turned out to be 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And the microphone recorded something that sounded like human groans and screams. Many people thought the scientists had been able to drill into the underworld. The shocked people up above had already begun to panic, but suddenly an unknown creature jumped out of the drill pipe. It looked like a black goat that walked on its hind legs. Its body was shrouded in black flames. The creature got out of those deep hollows and ran off into an unknown direction. Okay, wait. These are just myths that one newspaper published on the 1st of April. It's International Joke Day, by the way, but many people believed it. It made many believe the scientists working at the borehole had opened a portal to the nether, and that now horrible, outworldly creatures were free from their imprisonment. But like with any myth, there's some truth to it. The deeper the scientists drilled, the higher the temperature got. At 3 miles deep, it was 160 degrees. At 4.5 miles, it was 250. And at the maximum depth of 7.5 miles, the sensors recorded a temperature of 413 degrees. One day, scientists heard a loud explosion underground. They stopped working and everyone tried to find out what caused such a loud pop. But there was seemingly nothing there. After a while, they continued drilling deeper, and at the same depth, no accidents happened. The drilling began in May 1970. They passed the first 4.5 miles quite easily, and it was primarily hard granite rock. It was like drilling through a hard wall. But then their drill went into softer layers, and the shaft of the hole began to crumble. It was like drilling in wet sand. Every time the workers took the drill out, there was a risk that the hole would collapse under its own weight. As that eventually happened, the scientists picked a new direction to drill, and you know what's interesting? In the end, the map of the entire well looked not like a straight beam from top to bottom, but like a tree trunk which had diverged into many different routes. 9 years later, scientists reached the depth of 31,400 feet and broke the world record for the deepest borehole. By 1983, they made it another 8,000 feet deeper. After a brief pause in the work, there was an accident. A part of the drill broke away from the main body and remained in the borehole. For several months, scientists tried to extract the drill, but nothing worked, and they had to return to the depth of 4.5 miles and start all over again. The drill was divided into sections, and one such unit could only last about 4 hours before it had to be replaced. In terms of depth, that was only about 32 feet of drilling. Then the drill was lifted to the surface, replaced, and lowered back down. On average, the drilling speed was about 200 feet per month. That's like a 20-story building. In 1990, 20 years after the work had begun, scientists reached the final depth of 40,230 feet. That's like 100 soccer fields down. And after another accident, the work stopped. Guinness World Records registered the Kola Super Deep Borehole as the deepest borehole in the world. It's like Mount Everest plus 9 Empire State Buildings on top of it. One of the most unusual discoveries at the Kola Super Deep Borehole was that the soil at the depth of about 2 miles almost perfectly matches the composition of the surface of the moon. It has given us more insight into how our ancient satellite appeared and formed. It seems that in the early stages of Earth's formation, a giant asteroid crashed into our planet. With that kind of force, it caused an explosion so powerful that part of our planet broke off and flew upward. This chunk of Earth remained in our planet's orbit, cooled, and later formed into the moon we know today. Another surprise for the workers was the presence of gold. There was about 2.5 ounces of gold for every ton of soil lifted. The deeper the scientists went, the older the rocks were. In layers of rock about 2.8 billion years old, they found fossilized remains of living organisms. It made the world of science bubble with excitement, as it meant that life on our planet appeared 1.5 billion years earlier than first thought. In the early 1990s, they shut down the drilling project. Gradually, the buildings around the borehole and the drilling equipment were lost. Today, a lot of tourists visit the place. It's because of those same myths about creatures from the underworld. Yes, there's a hole 7.5 miles deep under that rusty lid. But the scientists working there never reached their goal. They wanted to drill into the Earth's mantle, but to do that, they would have had to dig down to a depth of about 44 miles. At 200 feet per month, it would have taken as long as 80 years. That's assuming no accidents happened. But the deeper it goes, the more interesting it gets. A few years ago, they found a massive amount of water deep underground. Somewhere up to 370 miles down, there's a substantial ocean billions of years old, and the amount of water there is several times greater than in all the oceans, seas, and rivers combined on the surface of Earth. The water there is at a scorching 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But because it's under a tremendous pressure, it doesn't evaporate. It's encased in a crystalline structure of minerals. This ocean was formed in the early stages of our planet's development, when there was only hot lava and debris of space bodies around. But the most exciting thing you can find by drilling is living organisms. They've been there in isolation for billions of years, and they can give us clues as to how life came into being in the first place. Scientists in Antarctica have created a similar borehole. An entire lake half the size of Lake Ontario was discovered under the thick ice. The amount of water in this lake is only 3.5 times less than in the Lake Baikal, the largest lake on Earth by volume. The ice that hides this lake is at least 20,000 years old, and the water beneath it has been isolated from the outside world for about 15 million years. While drilling, scientists lifted a chunk of ice from deep down below and found an unknown bacterium on it. Its genetic code was only 86% similar to known living organisms. That means that we've never seen bacteria like this before, or it had come from outer space. But that's just a theory. We know that these bacteria can live in unusual conditions and at water temperatures below freezing. The composition of underground lake water is also different from what we're used to. There's a lot more oxygen and carbon dioxide in it. Add to these conditions complete isolation, and we get living organisms that have developed and evolved in a completely different way. Do you understand what it means? The study of deep organisms may give us a clue as to whether life could exist beneath the ice on other planets or their moons. For example, Saturn's moon, Enceladus, has ice 24 miles thick. There may be an ocean underneath, which is heated by thermal springs. That's all for today. And guys, remember, let's become smarter every day together with Brightside.
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed, and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learned about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo-Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo-Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo-Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, Most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the Lost City of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
What's the scariest predator under the ocean? The crocodile? Huh, I don't think so. Loch Ness Monster? Please, it never existed. How about the Kronosaurus? Well, it is extinct, but you might be onto something. Let's take a look at what it'd be like if these creatures were still around today. First things first, what on earth was it? The Kronosaurus was a marine carnivore that lived in the cool, high-latitude Eromanga Sea. It covered vast areas of inland Australia between 90 and 120 million years ago, during the early Cretaceous period. Near-complete fossils of the creature were also found near Colombia, which is a country that has a noted connection to prehistoric reptiles and turtles. This fact makes it extremely possible that the monster I'm about to describe existed worldwide. You might have heard saurus and thought, oh, it's a dinosaur. But these were actually reptiles. They were the largest member of the Plesiosauridae family, referred to as plesiosaurs. Fossil evidence suggests they weighed over 20,000 pounds and were roughly 30 feet in length. Just to put that in perspective, the longest crocodile ever measured was a saltwater crocodile by the name of Lolong from the Philippines. It was 20 feet in length and weighed just under 2,500 pounds. And that's still 10 feet shorter and incredibly lighter than the average Kronosaurus, making the crocodile seem like nothing more than a glorified goldfish in comparison. Despite its terrifying length, the most physically daunting feature of the Kronosaurus was its head. Its skull was about 8 feet long, which was actually proportionally large given the size of its body length. Anything that was unfortunate enough to end up inside the Kronosaurus's mouth may have been given false hope. After all, the teeth of the beast weren't actually that sharp. On second thought, I take that back. I wouldn't feel confident around a toothless snake, let alone being inside the mouth of this monster. But it's true that the Kronosaurus's teeth weren't sharp, especially when compared to other carnivorous reptiles, such as crocodiles and alligators. The teeth of this prehistoric sea creature were instead conical. This means that they were cone-like in shape. Unfortunately, this lack of sharpness didn't make them less dangerous. The teeth were enormous and could be up to 12 inches long from the crown tips to the bottom of the roots. This obviously meant that the Kronosaurus had an extremely powerful bite. It was estimated to be up to 30,000 newtons, which is almost twice as powerful as the bite of a large saltwater crocodile. Because of the bluntness of their teeth, they weren't suited for twisting their prey once in their grasp. But the size and shape of the teeth made them perfect for simple open and shut biting. They would have had no problem crushing hard objects such as the toughest of shells any sea turtle could offer. Just like crocodiles, the Kronosaurus is believed to have had a short neck. This may have been an adaptation to allow the beast to successfully catch small, evasive animals. Their body, in general, was fusiform and streamlined. This means it was narrowed at both ends and had very little resistance to the flow of water. The Kronosaurus was also equipped with 4 paddle-like limbs. The hind limbs were larger than the front ones. They could span approximately 7 feet in diameter. All in all, This set the Kronosaurus up to effortlessly propel itself through the waters and be an ultimate predator. Predator X, if you will? That's the name that was given to the fossil of a creature discovered near Svalbard, a Norwegian island group, in 2009. The fossil was identified as a 50-foot-long, 100,000-pound monster with a bite force of 33,000 pounds per square inch. This might be the highest bite force of any known animal. Although Predator X is yet to be classified as any specific type of animal, it was definitely a plesiosaur like the Kronosaurus. And even if it wasn't Predator X, the Kronosaurus was still most definitely a ferocious titan when it roamed Earth's oceans. The Kronosaurus actually got its name from the Greek mythological figure of Cronus, the father of Zeus. Cronus was viewed as a titan from a generation of super powerful beings. So what was it that the Kronosaurus, this terrifying monster, actually feasted on to satisfy its appetite? This creature was known to eat sea turtles, squid, and other larger marine reptiles of that time, such as elasmosaurids and ichthyosaurs. This suggests that if crocodiles existed in the realms of the Kronosaurus, they too might have turned into lunch for the beast. There's evidence from the fossil remains of the Kronosaurus that suggests that they also feasted on sharks, which I know is a disappointment to those of you who view that beast as the king of the ocean. Not when the Kronosaurus was around, my friend. In any case, grounding all kinds of food into small pieces to help digest them would have been difficult without small teeth. This explains the presence of rounded stones found in many of the remains of these sea creatures. Researchers believe these stones may have been swallowed to control buoyancy or to help process food. It's also entirely possible they were accidentally swallowed while feeding on other animals from the seafloor. As if the Kronosaurus even needed to be a meanie with its already existing power and size, there's also evidence to suggest that it indeed might have been. It turns out that after using all its impressive attributes to catch its dinner, the Kronosaurus first liked to play with its food, like a cat does with a mouse. I guess since the hunt was so easy for them, they needed to get their fun from somewhere else. Well, I think now you should have a good idea about these creatures. So let's ask ourselves what it would be like if they were still around today. And by the way, why aren't they? Well, the Kronosaurus was completely finished off by the same KT meteor that took out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But even before this catastrophic event, they were coming under increased pressure from an even bigger and more vicious family of carnivorous marine reptiles known as mosasaurs. You can't always be a top dog, I guess, or rather, top marine reptile. But what if this never happened, and they were still roaming Earth? Well, this might be obvious, but can you imagine what kind of impact that would have on sea tourism? Based on the impact that famous movies about sharks and killer whales had, what do you think the presence of a Kronosaurus in the ocean would do to beaches? The very creature that would eat sharks and whales for breakfast. Beaches would certainly become a great place to go for a quiet walk, because nobody else would even be there. And what about such activities as boating, surfing, and scuba diving? You think anyone would dare try them, knowing that this 30-foot beast could be lurking beneath them? Let's give humans some credit and assume most of them wouldn't. This would cripple the global sea tourism industry, which is responsible for earning roughly $143 billion every year. Just to make sure this shocking point hits home, the most expensive yacht to ever roam the ocean was called the History Supreme. Its master bedroom was believed to have a statue made of T-Rex's bone and a wall made of meteorite rocks, as well as a 24-karat gold panoramic wall aquarium. Anyway, this yacht was worth nearly $5 billion, meaning you could buy 38 of them with the money lost in potential damages to sea tourism caused by the Kronosaurus. I'm sure that the yacht's owner was happy the beast never made an appearance in their luxurious aquarium. So luxurious, in fact, that some people believe the History Supreme, reportedly owned by some business genius from Malaysia, never even existed. Rumor has it that it was simply an elaborate hoax fabricated by the supposed designer. Anyway, I don't think the trouble would just stop there. people could actually be in serious danger, regardless of being near the ocean or not. No, I'm not about to tell you that this thing would grow legs, adapt to living on land, and start picking us off one by one. At least, I hope not. I'm just going to point out the damage that the Kronosaurus would inflict through its devastating impact on sea trade. In America, ocean transit accounts for 76% of national trade. On top of this, more than 100 vital pharmaceutical products originate in the sea. I'll also state the obvious and point out that the ocean is a huge food source for us humans. The presence of the Kronosaurus could have a great impact on our relationship with the ocean, something we usually take for granted.
Well, hey there. We dive back in time and into the oceans over 500 million years ago, just, because we can. Whoa, watch out! It's not megalodon or giant sea reptiles you need to look out for here. It's a bizarre, unearthly-looking creature called Anomalocaris. The name means unlike any other shrimp, and I think you'll agree, it looks like a nightmarish cross between a shrimp and a modern-day centipede. 2 tentacles protruding from its face, each lined with razor-sharp teeth. Oh yeah, and this thing was about the size of your leg. With a wave-like movement of the flaps on each side of its body, it was graceful for a terrifying creature. It was also more advanced than any other life on this planet at the time. Especially those huge eyes. You have only one lens in each of yours. This giant shrimp had 16,000. That's 4 times more than a common housefly. And you know how good their vision is. Good enough to dodge that swatter every time. All this allowed Annie to become one of the first animals on this planet to feed on others. Yep, here it is. Earth's first hunter. Its favorite meal? Trilobites. Hey, try a bite. Those are the ancient ancestors of crabs. Some of their fossils have marks on them in the same shape as the monster shrimp's mouthparts. Terrors of the past like this got to be so giant thanks to more oxygen in the atmosphere. A perfect example of this, Meganeuropsis. Imagine a dragonfly. Now make it as big as a cat, and with a wingspan longer than your arm. Megan, the monster-sized dragonfly, could easily grab other insects or even small animals, and she ruled the air with quick movements. Back then, there were still no large birds or other airborne enemies for this behemoth bug, so it was safe and free to grow as large as this planet would allow. Piranhas of the past were also jumbo-sized. Mega piranha was about 3 times the size of the river terrors we have today. Its bite force was about the same as a tiger's, and those striped kitties bite down 2 times harder than lions. That means it probably not only dined on other fish and any land creatures that, got too close to the water, but it could also easily crunch down on large turtles and other unlucky shelled creatures. And fun fact, modern-day piranhas bark like dogs when they're about to enter a confrontation. It actually sounds more like a frog's ribbit. But makes you wonder, what did this mega-sized ancient cousin sound like? A bear roaring? How about giant sea scorpions the size of your bed? Go back about 460 million years and you'd see them swimming under you. And watch out for that tail. Scientists still don't know if these creatures could use it to inject venom like your standard land scorpion. But something tells me I wouldn't want that thing anywhere near me. Then there's this guy, Therizinosaurus. Terry looks sort of like a goose with long arms. Oh, and did I mention this goose dino is about 2 stories tall and longer than a bus? Yow! Its arms make the T-Rexes look even more bite-sized, each 8 feet long, almost triple the length of T-Rexes. And on the end, razor-sharp claws the size of your whole arm. Now, don't worry about those lengthy claws too much, though. Terry probably used them to cut through giant termite nests. So, this huge reptilian goose was more interested in eating bugs and plants. Another mega monster for you, Megatherium. The giant ground sloth could look a giraffe straight in the eye and weighed as much as a hippo. It moved mainly on its hind legs and used its massive tail as support. He had huge paws with colossal knife-sized claws. The sloth could use them to defend itself from enemies and to bend tree branches in search of food. But the biggest danger to the giant ground sloth wasn't dinosaurs or saber-toothed tigers. It was our own species. Yep, humans showed up just in time to meet this fellow and to, eat him up. Titanoboa was a terrifying 50-foot snake, as long as the great megalodon itself. It was also more than 2 times heavier than the heavyweight champion among snakes today, the green anaconda. Crocodiles were a regular on this serpent's menu. Titanoboa could swim 3 times faster than the fastest Olympic swimmer our species has ever seen. It was quicker and more dangerous in the water than outside it. And don't forget the boa part of the snake. This massive snake wasn't venomous. Instead, it liked to squeeze. Remember that giant shrimp from earlier? Well, Opabenia looks like its teeny-tiny finger-sized cousin. And instead of 2 toothy tentacles, this thing had a vacuum hose coming out of its face. On the end of that trunk, what looks like a single crab claw. Add 5 eyes and a mouth under its head, and you've got a recipe for something not of this planet. Only it is. This creature used its trunk like an elephant does. Its claw grabbed food from the bottom of the ocean and brought it up to its mouth. This thing is so weird-looking that, apparently, when the scientists who discovered it presented his findings to an audience, they all laughed as if he were joking. Now, a real-life monster, the Tully monster. From a distance, it looks a bit like Nessie, that long neck and teeth-lined jaws. But get closer, and you'll see it's more like a long nose with a mouth attached at the end, like a mosquito. Its eyes are further back, sticking out of tubes all snail-like. Tully was an ancient mollusk, about the size of your forearm. It probably dined on jellyfish and shrimp 300 million years ago. Thylacus smilus will put a smile on your face as long as you don't get too close. No, it's not a relative of the saber-toothed tiger. It was a marsupial, making it more related to a kangaroo than anything. And if you compare them to body size, its fangs were actually longer than a saber-toothed tiger's. And they grew continuously. As for that beard on its chin, that's actually all chin. The lower jawbone grew down to a point under the mouth. Those fangs were rooted to the skull, going way back to its eyes. When the mouth was closed, that bony beard protected the long, sharp teeth from breakage. Staganapolis, not to be confused with Minneapolis, might look like a big crocodile with a squished-in snout, but it was mostly harmless. Its small head and very few teeth meant the reptile didn't have much to work with when protecting itself. That's what all those armored scales were for, and no need for huge fangs or long rows of razor-sharp teeth when you're a plant eater. That beak-like tip on its nose allowed the stag to dig up plants. So, really, this reptile was more like a 10-foot scaly pig than a croc. Basilosaurus was a type of ancient whale that lived on our planet about 45 million years ago. Not quite as long as a blue whale, but this guy was still big enough to munch down on other whales and even sharks. Some people believe these monsters could still exist today. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen a giant sea dragon, and Basilosaurus fits the description. Plus, 90% of our oceans are unexplored. There's plenty of space to hide a sea monster. But scientists haven't found any fossils of this ancient whale younger than 3.7 million years. So, this myth is busted. Stegosaurus is one of the most recognizable dinosaurs that ever lived. It can easily be distinguished by those huge spikes on its tail and the bony plates on its back. It was twice as long as a giraffe and nearly 5 times heavier. But compared to its body size, it had the world's smallest brain. It was no larger than a dog's. Pelagornis had the largest wingspan of any bird ever discovered. It was twice the size of the largest bird today, the wandering albatross. Such huge wings made it hard for the bird to take off. It could only do so by jumping off cliffs. And when it finally spread its wings, this giant could only go about 40 miles per hour. The fastest bird today can reach speeds 5 times that.
Scientists discovered the largest water reservoir in the Oregon Cascades. It's hiding underground, holding more than twice the water volume of Lake Mead. Let me specify. It contains at least 19.4 cubic miles of water, which is almost 162 trillion bottles of water. If you drank one bottle a day, it would take you around 444 billion years to finish your stock. No wonder this underground aquifer discovery is so awesome. The Cascade Mountain Range, which contains the largest aquifer on Earth, stretches about 700 miles from Northern California to British Columbia. The high Cascades in Oregon have younger volcanic rocks, around 8 million years old. The Western Cascades are much older, 45 million years. They boast deep canyons and valleys. Scientists study the transition zone between these two areas to understand how water moved through volcanic rock and how volcanic processes had evolved over time. In the process, researchers measured rock temperatures at different depths. That's when the underground aquifer discovery happened. Normally, deeper rocks should be hotter because it's closer to the Earth's interior. But to everyone's surprise, in several areas, the temperature stayed the same even at greater depths. Well, this was a strong clue that water was flowing through the rock and cooling it down. In other words, the Cascades function like a natural water tower, storing and slowly releasing water into rivers and streams. These geological water findings are important for two main reasons. First, it's our potential water source for the future. Such a massive amount of water stored underground could be an important resource. So far, we don't know how long it will remain in its current state and how resilient it's going to be to changes. So, we need more research to properly manage its use. Secondly, it affects volcanic activity. When water seeps deep underground and reaches magma, it instantly turns into steam, creating extreme pressure that can trigger explosive volcanic eruptions. Understanding how much water is stored in volcanic rock could help predict future eruptions and the risks they pose. Now, even though this discovery is exciting, there are still many unanswered questions. Like, how does this water move through the volcanic rock? Or how much of it is actually usable as a water resource? Since this underground reservoir depends on rain and snow, a series of dry years could cause big problems for both water supply and volcanic stability. Researchers are now working to understand the full impact of the Cascades volcanic water reservoir and how to manage it responsibly. But let's look closely at the geological wonder that is the Cascade Range. Picture this, a massive mountain range stretching all the way from Northern California up to British Columbia, cutting right through the middle of Oregon. That's the mountain range we're talking about. In Oregon alone, it's about 260 miles long and up to 90 miles wide, covering 17,000 square miles. Whoa, that's bigger than each of the 9 smallest US states. The coolest thing is that the Oregon part of this mountain range is basically built by volcanoes, and apparently contains at least one volcanic rock water storage. The range itself exists because of something called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, where the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate, a chunk of Earth's crust under the Pacific Ocean, is slowly getting shoved beneath North America. As it sinks, the intense heat and pressure force water out of the oceanic rock. It lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle and creates magma. That magma rises up and fuels the Cascade volcanoes. This is part of the Ring of Fire, the giant belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific. So, in a way, the Cascades are part of a much bigger volcanic system that's constantly shifting and changing. The Oregon Cascades are actually made up of 2 completely different zones, the Western Cascades and the High Cascades, and they look nothing alike. The Western Cascades are the older part. They formed around 45 million years ago. These mountains are rugged and deeply carved up by rivers. Some canyons are as deep as 3,700 feet. This part of the range used to be volcanically active, but over time, erosion has taken over, reshaping the land. The High Cascades, on the other hand, are much younger and way less eroded. around 8 million years ago, the volcanic activity shifted, and new eruptions filled in old canyons, smoothing out the landscape. Eruptions kept piling up fresh lava, and rivers in this region didn't have as much time to create deep valleys like they did in the Western Cascades. That's why if you look at the two regions side by side, one looks jagged and carved up, while the other looks smoother and more built up. Some of Oregon's most famous volcanoes are located in the high Cascades. I'm talking about Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, the Three Sisters, and Crater Lake, which actually formed when Mount Mazama erupted and collapsed in on itself. Unlike smaller volcanoes that pop up, erupt for a bit, and disappear over a few months or years, these giant volcanic centers have been active for thousands of years. And because they've been around for so long, they have way more complex magma systems. They produce everything from basalt, which is a runny, fast-moving lava, to andesite, dacite, and rhyolite. And rhyolite is the type of magma that leads to huge explosive eruptions. So, while some of these volcanoes might just ooze lava, others have the potential for devastating blasts. Another amazing thing about these long-lived volcanoes is that their underground magma chambers stay hot for a really long time. That's why the Cascades are one of the best places to tap into geothermal energy. There's a ton of heat just sitting beneath the surface, waiting to be used. Oh, and don't forget about the Cascades volcanic water reservoir. Who knows how we will use it in the future? Now, we already know that the Cascades are part of the magnificent Ring of Fire, Earth's most explosive zone. Imagine a massive horseshoe-shaped belt wrapping around the Pacific Ocean, stretching for about 25,000 miles. It's one of the most geologically active areas on the planet. This is where Earth's tectonic plates are constantly shifting, colliding, and grinding against each other, creating some of the world's most powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and deep ocean trenches. The Ring of Fire follows the meeting points of multiple tectonic plates, and they all surround the giant Pacific Plate. These plates aren't just sitting still, they're always on the move, pushing against or sliding beneath each other at their boundaries, known as fault lines. When this happens, you get everything from deep-sea trenches to towering volcanoes and violent earthquakes. One of the most extreme examples of this activity is the Mariana Trench, located east of Guam. At 7 miles deep, it's the deepest ocean trench on Earth. It was formed by a process called subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, sinking deep into the Earth's mantle. The Mariana Trench is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's insanely deep, with crushing pressure and total darkness. So for a long time, people thought nothing could live down there. But it turned out that life existed even at the very bottom. In 2005, scientists found a tiny single-celled organism in the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They also came across colorful rocky formations and weird sea cucumbers. The Mariana Trench also has hydrothermal vents, which are basically underwater hot springs. Even though the water there is super hot and acidic, strange creatures and microscopic life forms still manage to survive there. The Ring of Fire is also responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Some of the most powerful quakes in history have happened here, including the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile, the strongest ever recorded, which hit a mind-boggling 9.5 on the Richter scale. But it's not just about earthquakes. The Ring of Fire is also home to about 75% of the planet's volcanoes. Some of the most famous eruptions in history have come from this region, like the infamous Mount Tambora in Indonesia. In short, the Ring of Fire is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but it's also incredibly fascinating. Who knows what else scientists might discover in that region, like they discovered the largest water reservoir in the Cascades.
It happened 66 million years ago. Hey, it could have been September. A massive asteroid slammed into Earth, bringing along chaos and devastation. The tragic aftermath of the terrifying collision led to the extinction of dinosaurs. Yes, I'm talking about the Chicxulub asteroid that left a massive crater in Mexico and changed life on Earth forever. And now, it turns out it wasn't the only cosmic rock to hit our planet during that time. Scientists have just confirmed there was another asteroid. This second space rock wasn't as big as Chicxulub, but it still packed a punch. It crashed to the ground off the coast of West Africa, smashing into the ocean and leaving a crater called the Nader crater. And tell you what, it wasn't a small splash. The impact was so powerful, it triggered a whole tsunami. It was more than 2,600 feet high, almost as high as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest man-made structure in the world. But how did we come to the conclusion that there was a second impact? Well, this researcher spotted the Nader crater in 2022. Dr. Nicholson was looking for some high-tech scans of the ocean floor when he noticed a massive 5.5-mile-wide depression under almost 1,000 feet of water. Well, he thought it could be an asteroid impact crater, but at the time, the evidence he had wasn't solid. But now, scientists have confirmed that this is the real deal. A second asteroid did hit Earth during the dinosaur extinction era. Now, let's see how they figured all this out. For one thing, there were those super high-resolution 3D seismic images. They allowed researchers to peel back layers of the ocean floor and get a crystal-clear look at the crater. It was like going from a blurry old ultrasound to the kind of 3D scans where you can see every little feature. Their findings confirm that the crater was left by an asteroid, somewhere between 1,500 to 1,640 feet wide. And it didn't just create a hole in the ground. The impact was so intense that it produced a central peak, formed escalating ridges around the crater, and even left a damage zone that stretched out for thousands of miles. Using those super detailed images, the scientists have managed to reconstruct what happened right after the asteroid hit the surface of our planet. First, it slammed into the ocean, creating an initial bowl-shaped crater. As the shockwave spread, the seabed was shaken so violently that it triggered landslides, and the soft sediment surrounding the crater collapsed inward, creating a noticeable brim. As you already know, the impact also triggered a tsunami, and it was so shockingly powerful that its waves didn't just go outward, they actually turned back towards the crater, leaving huge scars on the ocean floor. And this wasn't just one big wave. No, it was a whole series of them, a train of tsunamis smashing everything in their path. Now, this second asteroid impact is a huge deal for scientists. It's a rare opportunity to study a marine impact crater in such incredible detail. There are only about 20 confirmed marine craters in the world, and none of them have been captured with this level of precision before. Plus, this data allows scientists to test new ideas about how craters form in water. You see, unlike craters on land, marine craters are hidden under layers of sediment, which makes them tricky to study. But with this new 3D imaging, we can look at the crater in all its layers. It's like slicing into a cake to see what's inside. Dr. Nicholson and his team are now dreaming of drilling into the crater and recovering samples from deep below the ocean floor. This would allow them to measure the shock pressure during the impact and figure out what happened in the minutes, hours, and days following the collision. Of course, the Chicxulub asteroid is still the star of the show when it comes to the dinosaurs' extinction. This space traveler was giant, somewhere between 6 and 9 miles wide. It hit Earth at a devastating angle, sending vaporized rock and gas into the atmosphere. It caused an impact winter that lasted for 15 years, because all that stuff blocked out the sun and plunged Earth into darkness. Now, probably the most intriguing thing is that some experts think the Nader asteroid might have been a chunk that had broken off from Chicxulub before it hit Earth. It's still just a theory, but if true, it could mean that Earth got hit by a double whammy from space. Now, let's travel back in time to the year 1908 in Siberia. Look around. You see nothing but trees and rivers. And suddenly, a huge object, around 150 to 300 feet in diameter, dashes through the Earth's atmosphere. Is it a comet? An asteroid? Scientists aren't sure. What they do know for sure is that this intruder blew up in the sky over Tunguska, leading to one of the most powerful blasts in recorded history. It completely leveled the forest below, knocking out 80 million trees over an area of around 830 square miles. And that's an area larger than that of cities like Los Angeles or New York. The trees were literally flattened, and their trunks were stripped of branches. They were also arranged in a bizarre radial pattern around the epicenter. But what if this explosion had happened over a city? Every single building would have been destroyed, and countless lives would have been lost. Luckily, this disaster occurred in a super remote part of Siberia. The creepiest thing, though? When scientists finally reached the area years later, they found no impact crater. No wonder it led to even more mystery. The most logical explanation is that when the object went off in the sky, probably around 3 to 6 miles above the ground, it blew up before it could hit the ground, and still, it didn't stop the blast from leveling an entire forest. Fast forward to 2013 and another mind-blowing event, this time over a much more populated area, the city of Chelyabinsk. It was a regular February morning when an asteroid about 60 feet in diameter entered Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky. It was moving at a staggering speed of around 43,000 miles per hour. It blew up in midair, about 18 miles above the city. It was a horrific view, but luckily, the asteroid disintegrated high enough in the atmosphere without hitting the ground. If it had touched down, the city would have been in big trouble, because even though there was no direct impact, the explosion still created a shockwave that tore through the atmosphere, hitting the ground with enough force to shatter windows all over the place. The blast damaged around 7,200 buildings, but fortunately, there were no direct fatalities. Still, it was a major wake-up call. This wasn't just some far-off cosmic event like Tunguska. This asteroid exploded over a modern populated area, and the damage was very real. The good news? Scientists are getting better at spotting such objects before they get too close. Space agencies around the world, like NASA, are tracking near-Earth objects to figure out which ones could pose a risk. But as we can see from these two events, sometimes space rocks can still sneak up on us. And while the chances of a major impact are low, the stakes are really high. At the moment, there's one asteroid that NASA's keeping an eye on. It's called Bennu, and it's about the same size as the Nader impactor. Bennu is considered one of the most hazardous objects in near-Earth orbit. According to NASA, there's a small chance it could hit the Earth between the years 2178 and 2290, and the biggest risk date is September 24, 2182. But don't freak out just yet. The odds of the impact are only 1 in 2,700, but still, it's a reminder that Earth is always in the cosmic firing line. Hurricanes can be a lot scarier than we often realize, especially since they can actually trigger earthquakes. This surprising and frightening phenomenon, known as stormquakes, was discovered completely by accident not too long ago. It started with scientists trying to find out more about low-frequency earthquakes. We're talking about those earthquakes that are so weak that we can't actually feel the tremor. See, beneath our feet, the Earth is constantly vibrating in subtle, unceasing ways that we can't hear or see without the right equipment. This geologic hum, so to speak, is driven by the movement of oceans, which covers about 70% of our planet's surface. Scientists have found that this hum may actually provide useful records of environmental happenings. To figure out where it's coming from, experts used equipment known as seismometers. You can think of these devices as little ears pressed to the ground. They can pick up all sorts of vibrations, like fans jumping up and down at their idol's concert, airplanes flying by, or even super distant earthquakes shaking the ground. Very low-frequency earthquakes are hard to track over long distances because the signals they produce can look different on different measuring devices. To solve this problem, experts came up with a way to track these signals by combining readings from smaller areas, kind of like putting together a puzzle. But while doing this, they stumbled upon a strange set of events that looked a bit like the earthquakes they were studying, but were not exactly the same. The first weird thing they noticed was that this specific phenomenon was seasonal. It never happened between May and August, for example. That is completely different from earthquakes, which can pretty much happen any time of the year. The second strange thing is that earthquakes usually occur more in the western part of the United States, where the ground moves along cracks in the surface. But these new strange vibrations spread not just along the west coast of North America, but also over to the east side. So what could be triggering this new phenomenon? What they surprisingly discovered is that many of these tremors coincided with the same time that massive storms hit North America. So we are essentially talking about a chain reaction. What happens is that during a specific season, hurricanes or heavy storms can transfer energy into the oceans, creating very strong waves. These waves then interact with the solid Earth, producing intense seismic activity. These bursts of energy that are born from massive storms can radiate thousands of miles across continents, leading to what we now call stormquakes. It is believed that this phenomenon can trigger earthquakes at a magnitude of up to 3.5 on the Richter scale. This means it can be felt by many people, but normally doesn't cause any damage. But that doesn't mean we can all be relaxed now, as ocean waters can indeed increase the intensity of hurricanes. Just like what happened with the frightening Hurricane Milton, which recently left a path of destruction across Florida. The blue-purplish zone you're looking at is Hurricane Milton, seen from a satellite perspective. On October 9th, this hurricane sustained winds of 155 miles per hour and lashed the region with heavy rainfall, damaging winds, and life-threatening storm surges. Estimates show that the losses could be up to $34 billion, which could make it one of the costliest storms in United States history. What happened with Hurricane Milton was pretty tricky. It all started with some record hot water in the Gulf of Mexico. That warm water acted like a power-up, giving this hurricane the energy it needed to grow. And then, there was also this process called eye wall replacement that helped it get bigger too. We'll get to that in a moment. So as Hurricane Milton approached the coast, something unusual happened. It crossed paths with a fast-moving air current called the jet stream, which flows high up in the atmosphere. Now normally, the winds in the northern and northwest parts of a hurricane are not as strong as those in other areas. But because of this interaction with the jet stream, the winds in these parts of the storm became much stronger than expected. At nearly every turn, Hurricane Milton surprised everyone and intensified faster than we have seen in ages. It threatened to slam both Florida's west and east coasts with a dangerous surge of water, putting the bustling area of Tampa Bay, which is home to over 3 million people, at serious risk. So how did Milton become such a major problem? Well, the problem started in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Usually, hurricanes follow a fairly predictable path, spinning off of Africa's coast, sailing across the Atlantic, and gaining strength in the warm Caribbean waters. But Milton had a twist in its origin story. It began as the remnants of a tropical depression that crossed over the Yucatan Peninsula and met a stalled front in the Gulf. Once Milton got going, it didn't hold back. But when it hit those record-high ocean temperatures, it was like giving it an energy drink. The warm water and humid air were the perfect ingredients for a hurricane on the rise. Quickly, Milton's wind speeds increased by 92 miles per hour, so it went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in less than 2 days, which is basically insane and off the charts. And if that wasn't enough, Hurricane Milton also went through this thing called eye wall replacement. Now, hurricanes spin around a mostly clear eye in the center. But overnight, Milton started forming new bands of rain on its outer edges, creating a second ring around its eye. This process helped Milton grow even bigger, spreading out the wind speeds and giving it a larger footprint. It's kind of like shedding its skin and getting ready to become even more powerful. Hurricane Milton also had this little wobble in its path, which changed where it was heading. You can think of it like a spinning top that gets nudged and wobbles a bit before finding its balance again. That wobble meant some areas could get either hit hard or be spared from the worst of the storm. Thankfully, Hurricane Milton weakened a bit because of some tricky wind changes up in the atmosphere until it finally made landfall. After that, it moved across the peninsula and headed out to sea, quickly losing strength as it pulled away from the warmer waters. Now, even though the damage was significant, the good news, if you can call it that, is that experts were honestly expecting things to be way worse. Still, it raises a question. How close was Milton's wind speed to the maximum? Or, in other words, is there a limit to how strong a hurricane can get? Well, the answer is yes, there is a speed limit for hurricane winds, but it's not a set number. Right now, the strongest the storm can get is around 200 miles per hour. But that maximum speed can change depending on many factors, like the heat in the ocean. Think of the ocean as the fuel for hurricanes. The warmer the water, the more fuel these storms have to work with. Experts believe that as the oceans continue to warm, they can ramp up the wind speeds and the impacts of hurricanes, making them a lot stronger. But other things can also help figure out how intense a hurricane can get. For example, the heat in the air and the temperature at the top of the clouds matter, as they also affect how fast heat moves from the ocean surface to the top of the storm. Some estimates suggest that maximum wind speeds could reach closer to 220 miles per hour until the end of the century. So it's definitely something that experts need to keep an eye on to help prevent future disasters. As we move forward, it's essential to keep researching and studying these storms. The more we understand them, the better we can protect ourselves and our communities.
This sleek, state-of-the-art submarine named Ran was sent to explore the depths of Antarctica. But as soon as it discovered something, it mysteriously disappeared. So, what happened? It all started when scientists wanted to explore one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth, the Dotson Ice Shelf in West Antarctica. This ice shelf, silent giant, stretches 30 miles wide. That's almost the length of New York City. It stands between two icy promontories, the Martin and Bear Peninsulas, and it hides an entire world of geological mysteries. If you think that Antarctica is nothing but a desert of super thick snow and ice, you're wrong. There are entire landscapes hidden deep down there. The underside of the Dotson Ice Shelf is a rugged, dynamic terrain shaped by the slow, relentless forces of nature. There are towering ice formations, deep troughs, and bizarre structures stretching for hundreds of feet. Scientists are super curious about it, but as you can imagine, this landscape isn't easy to explore at all. To find out more, we have to scan the area with satellites or try drilling through the snow, trying to collect the big picture, piece by piece. But these methods only gave us vague hints. The real breakthrough happened when scientists came up with the idea to let the submarines explore it. Autonomous submersibles could swoop deep into the icy waters beneath the Dotson Ice Shelf and tell us what's up down there. These robotic explorers have fantastic advanced sonar systems. It's that thing that bats or dolphins do. They can use sound to see the world. Basically, they send out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something like the ice shelf above or the seafloor below, they bounce back to the system. Animals feel how long it took for the sound waves to return and how they changed. And this helped them understand what's located where. For example, clicks that dolphins send out tell them where the fish are. We copied this crazy evolutionary trick and adapted it to our underwater exploration. Only our version is much cooler, with a higher level of precision, so we created detailed maps of the environment. The Rand submarine was one of those robotic explorers. It was named after the Norse deity of the sea. Ran had been meticulously programmed to navigate a treacherous landscape of Antarctica. But even with all this training, its journey led to an unexpected and eerie end. In 2019, Ran was sent to explore the depths beneath the Dotson Ice Shelf. It was a hero, the first one to go on a mission like this. The team said it was like seeing the other side of the moon. For 27 straight days, it worked tirelessly. It traveled over 620 miles beneath the thick ice. That's like a journey from Paris to Berlin. Ran went further and deeper than anyone could have imagined. At one point, it reached over 10 miles into the glacier's belly, and what it discovered down there was astonishing. Scientists thought there would be some smooth, uniform ice surfaces, but Ran revealed an underside marked by huge cracks, ridges. There were formations that looked like sand dunes, frozen in time. And finally, it found some mysterious swirling and teardrop-shaped patterns. They all looked more like art than geology. This actually tells the story of ice shelves and the ocean around it. Warm water sneaks in under the ice and melts it from below. Sometimes it smooths the ice out, but other times it carves out these weird, uneven shapes that look like patterns and drawings. And some of these shapes are huge. over 1,300 feet long. That's about 3.5 football fields. The reason why they look like swirling doodles is because the Earth spins. It makes the water turn in special ways, bending the shapes and drawing these spirals. It's called the Coriolis effect. Imagine you were on a merry-go-round and tried to throw something like a ball. It would go in a curve, not a straight line. Same thing happens with the water on Earth. Later, scientists found similar patterns in other Antarctic ice shelves, though they weren't as epic as the ones under Dodson. But Ran also discovered something horrifying. Turns out that these warm waters, aside from being great artists, are also a huge danger. The Dodson ice shelf isn't just hanging out serenely on the sea. It's part of a very delicate system and acts as a protective barrier that holds back huge glaciers in West Antarctica. The ice shelf is floating on the ocean, but it's still connected to the land. As warm water sneaks underneath it and the ice melts, the Dodson can't hold on to the land as tightly anymore. The protective barrier starts to weaken, and this lets the glaciers behind it move faster into the ocean. When those glaciers flow into the sea, they add more water, which could cause sea levels to rise, eventually changing our coastlines. Rand stumbled upon huge pockets where the ice was melting at alarming rates, all due to powerful underwater currents. It was like seeing a ticking clock on the glacier. The stakes were high, but luckily the submarine was ready. This time, it managed to return. And then, it worked for 5 more years, helping scientists with tons of useful data. The missions were daunting. There could be periods where Rand slipped into the pitch-black cavity beneath the glaciers, spending 24 hours without communication. But it was mapping every peak and every valley. It gained experience from over 40 missions below ice. Then, in early 2024, Rand went on a mission to the Thwaites Glacier. The mission was bold from the start. This place is also ominously referred to as the Doomsday Glacier. It's called that because it's slowly melting and has the potential to raise sea levels worldwide if it collapses, causing catastrophes everywhere. That's why Rand was dispatched to explore its underbelly, a place that had never been mapped so intricately before. The idea was to uncover the glacier's secrets, study how rapidly it was melting and why. This was Rand's second time exploring Thwaites. During the previous visit, it became the first sub to ever map the glacier's underside. Rand was exploring the depths from 650 feet to 1,650 feet. It sent a lot of data about how the Doomsday Glacier was slowly melting due to warm ocean currents. But while venturing into these icy depths, something went wrong. Out of nowhere, Rand vanished, without warning, without a trace. One moment it was sending back crucial data, and the next it had slipped into the abyss. No distress signals, no final transmission, and it didn't return to the point it was supposed to. People sent extensive searches, helicopters soared overhead, drones buzzed through the frozen skies, but no sign of the submersible emerged from the glacier's grasp. After a while, Rand's batteries would certainly run away. So at this point, it had definitely been swallowed by the abyss beneath 1,500 feet of ice. That was a huge and sad loss for the scientific team. The scientists at the University of Gothenburg are now looking to replace Rand and continue their important research under Thwaites. To this day, scientists have no idea what happened to it. Some say it may have been trapped in the ice. Others believe it was pulled away by an unseen current. It also might have collided with something unexpected. Whatever the truth is, its disappearance has left scientists stunned, and it looks like the ice shelf will hold on to its secrets a little longer. At least we gained a treasure trove of knowledge from Rand's journey. Scientists keep exploring Antarctica, looking for history that hides under the snow. For example, they discovered that around 90 million years ago, a lush temperate rainforest thrived near the South Pole. They revealed an ancient world far warmer than they ever imagined. Deep in Antarctica, they unearthed fossilized roots, pollen, and spores preserved in the soil. All this shows that there was a swampy rainforest that flourished despite months of polar darkness. All these discoveries changed our understanding of Earth's climate. both in the past and the future. A trip to Hawaii may become your last. This is exactly what happened to David Potts, who came to Maui to spend some quality time with his girlfriend. We all know that the ocean can pose a whole bunch of dangers. Riptides, sharks, poisonous algae. Even a seemingly safe sand hole can end your life in a matter of seconds. Blowholes can do that too. The thing is, they're not frequently spoken of, therefore, many people just don't know that they'd better stay away from them. Now, let me break it down for you what a blowhole is. You all know sea caves, right? As any other formation, these grow in size. In case they grow landward and upward, they sort of turn into vertical shafts, exposing themselves toward the surface. As of now, everything seems fine, no extreme danger whatsoever, right? But the scary things start if those shafts begin getting hydraulic compression. In this case, seawater is released through a port right on top of the blowhole. The result looks like a geyser, and by the way, those blowholes even have a second name: marine geysers. The height of the spray may vary, and it's up to the geometry of the cave and blowhole, combined with tidal levels and swell conditions. So what exactly happened to David, who met his early demise in Hawaii? Those who were unlucky enough to witness this horrible incident said that Mr. Potts had been spotted dancing around one of those blowholes. He was dangerously close, just inches away from the opening. Moreover, some people claimed he had even been playing in the sprays of water that were shooting high into the sky. Then he suddenly disappeared into thin air. As it was discovered later, he fell into a blowhole. There were no official statements concerning whether Mr. Potts had passed away or not, yet he was never found, meaning his destiny is pretty much clear to everyone. The story took place back in 2011, so he's definitely not coming back, sadly. The big question is, who's responsible for this tragedy? There are no warning signs at the sign, so David could not know how dangerous that innocent fun was in reality. Moreover, witnesses claim it was slippery there, so it must have been an accident. However, despite most tourists knowing how notorious this area is, they still continue visiting the site. No tragic reminders help. So, how do you save yourself in case you come across a blowhole? The best way to do that is to keep as far away from it as possible. If you get sucked by it, your chances of surviving are virtually nil. Just for comparison, not every tsunami gives you chances this low. For instance, a 1-foot water level tsunami only gives you a 0.01% probability of passing away. Even a 3-foot water level, when you literally cannot stand on the ground, only says that the probability of passing away is high. Blowholes, on the contrary, don't give you any chances. They pull you in once and for all. But how do these terrifying holes actually work? Blowholes are most likely to form in places where there are crevices. A good example of a crevice is a lava tube. A lava tube, or you can also alternatively hear the name pyroduct, is a natural channel created by the movement of lava from a volcanic vent when it's traveling beneath the solidified exterior of a lava flow. When the lava within the tube drains away, it results in the formation of a cave. Those tubes can often be found along fault lines. A fault line is a flat fracture in the rock where significant displacement has occurred due to rock movement. Major faults in the Earth's crust are caused by tectonic forces, often forming at plate boundaries, like those found in subduction zones or transform faults. The rapid movement of these active faults generates most earthquakes, although some faults may shift slowly without causing seismic activity. It's known as aseismic creep. The next ingredient is powerful waves. When they hit the coast, water gets in those crevices. But since there's high pressure inside, it bursts out in the form of spray. To be honest, it's a whole show, as those water bursts are accompanied by a particular loud noise, which makes it very attractive for tourists. Sure thing, these formations do not only exist in Hawaii. Probably the most popular blowhole out there is located far away from Maui, in New South Wales, Australia. There's a small town of Kiama, and only around 15,000 people call it home. However, this small place attracts myriads of people because of a blowhole also nicknamed Kiama. This name has a meaning behind it. It's literally translated as where the sea makes a noise. And remember, blowholes are normally accompanied by a particular sound. The town of Cayama literally makes its living thanks to this unusual geological formation, attracting up to 900,000 tourists each year. There must be something special to see other than the hole, right? Otherwise, so many people wouldn't be ready to pay their hard-earned money to travel there. The blowhole in question can spray water up to 82 feet in the air. Trust me, if you come close to this place, you'll get thoroughly drenched in water. While this is not surprising, as we're dealing with the world's biggest blowhole here. Remember I told you, once you get into the blowhole, there's no coming back? It's not entirely true. Scott Gutterson actually ventured inside, studied the blowhole, and even found a secret chamber there. When he first went down to the bottom of Cayama, he found there a couple of bronze statues, some fishing rods, hats, a push bike, and even money. Still, you gotta remember that Mr. Gutterson is a professional, and you should never repeat his stunts. It's not the only blowhole that the town of Cayama has to offer. There's one called Little Blowhole, all because of its narrow shape. The good thing about it is that it's safer to visit than its big brother, but it can promise views as spectacular as the big blowhole. The brothers are a bit far away from each other though. The big one is just several feet away from the coastline, and the little one is around a mile south of the main blowhole. Sometimes there are fun legends behind those natural phenomena. You see, modern people can explain why water bursts from underneath the ground. We know the mechanics and logic behind it. But in olden times, people were way more superstitious, and it was not only easier to explain various phenomena as something supernatural, sometimes it was the only one explanation available due to the lack of knowledge and equipment. Thus, La Bufadora, a big blowhole in Mexico, got its beautiful legend. People used to believe that there was a whale trapped in the rocky point, and that the whale would blow water to attract the attention of its pod. With time, the whale turned to stone and remained there forever. Nobody definitely believes in it in the 21st century, but this legend helps attract tourists from all over the world, which locals are very happy about. You see, La Bufadora is located in a small town 17 miles south of Ensenada, and the blowhole helps create working places. Locals opened souvenir and food places, and at some point, there were about 150 active businesses not far away from the famous blowhole. You can often hear that people call La Bufadora a marine geyser, and while some blowholes can be referred to this way, this is not the case with La Bufadora. This one lacks thermal sources, and thus it can't be called a geyser. The water sprout here is the result of air trapped in a sea cave and forced upward. For it to happen, a wave must push the air into the cave. As a result, this wave is released in the form of water, recedes, creating that signature spray going upward. By the way, those sprays can reach up to 100 feet into the air. The sprays have their own time frequency too. It depends on multiple factors. But as for La Bufadora, the range between eruptions is 13 to 17 seconds. The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, This mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean's surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly. but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh? These dark patches on Greenland's ice sheet aren't just any old stains. Every summer, the ice, which is usually bright white, turns murky gray in certain areas. This so-called dark zone was a huge mystery for a long time, until some studies discovered that this weird transformation was connected to the odd appearance of red, green, and brown-colored algae. The scariest part is that this algae bloom keeps growing. The dark zone is getting darker, and terrifying microbes might start appearing. Now, the rest of the world should be concerned. The Greenland ice sheet is like a massive ice blanket that covers around 80% of the island. It's so thick that it holds about 8% of the world's freshwater ice. For most of the year, the ice looks like a giant untouched white sheet stretching over the land. But when summer rolls around and temperatures start to rise, things begin to change. The ice melts, revealing rocky areas along the coast. And as you move further inland, that once smooth white ice becomes darker. This is the dark zone, and it covers an area of around 248 miles in length and 62 miles at its widest point. This weird phenomenon happens basically for 2 reasons. The first one is black carbon. Just like dust that builds up on your bookshelf, the ice in Greenland has the same issue. The wind carries a mix of dust and soot to this icy area. But unlike your bookshelf, you can't just wipe it off with a cloth. In Greenland's case, this dirty mix settles on the ice and sticks around for thousands of years. So, the dark zone is basically covered in a fine layer of dust that's built up over time. Back in 2014, researchers analyzed this dirty mix and found that the darker ice areas were filled with black carbon. This black carbon didn't just appear out of thin air. Well, actually, it sorta did. Scientists believe it mostly comes from smoke produced by wildfires in northern Canada and Alaska somewhere in the past. As you might guess, black carbon is black, which is why it makes the ice look darker. Now, the second big reason for the Greenland ice sheet's summer makeover has to do with those algae we mentioned earlier. We're mostly talking about two types of it: the Ancylonema alaskana and the Ancylonema nordenskjoldii. Both of them love cold water regions. During winter, they stay in a dormant state deep within the ice. But when spring comes, they start to slowly migrate to the surface. By the time summer hits, they're ready to bloom and soak up nearly 24 hours of sunlight each day for photosynthesis and growth. Normally, these algae are green, but when exposed to sunlight, they turn brown as a natural way to protect themselves from harmful ultraviolet rays. And this color change is also what makes the ice in Greenland look darker. So far, this has been normal behavior. What's really alarming is that these algae blooms are getting bigger and bigger every year. This happens because they thrive on phosphorus, a nutrient that's plentiful out there and comes from a mineral called hydroxylapatite. This mineral is found in a type of rock that breaks down into tiny dust particles, which are then blown across the ice by the wind. As the climate gets warmer, the rocks dry out more, and stronger winds carry more dust. More dust means more phosphorus, leading to more algae growth. See? It is a cycle, and it keeps getting worse every year. Studying this is crucial to understanding why the dark zone keeps getting bigger. From the year 2000 to 2012, its size increased by 12%. But you might be wondering, why should we care? After all, it's just ice getting darker, right? Well, not exactly. Think about how you can't stand wearing black clothes on a hot, sunny day. They soak up the heat and make you feel even hotter. That's because darker surfaces absorb more sunlight. The same thing happens to ice. Together, dust, black carbon, and algae blooms are responsible for about 70% of the variability in albedo on the Greenland ice sheet. Albedo is just a fancy word for how reflective a surface is. If you take two surfaces, one white and shiny and the other dark and rough, the white one will reflect a lot of light and heat, giving it a high albedo. The dark one, on the other hand, will absorb more light and heat, so it has a low albedo. During the summer, the Greenland ice sheet experiences a reduction in albedo. This means the ice absorbs more sunlight, and when ice absorbs more sunlight, it melts faster than it should. This is why understanding what's happening in the dark zone is so important. It helps predict how quickly the Greenland ice sheet is melting and how it can affect the rest of the world. Greenland's ice sheet is the second largest in the world, covering an area about the size of all the land in the United States east of the Mississippi River. And its huge mass of ice averages a thickness of 1.4 miles. Unfortunately, the ice loss has skyrocketed. Back in the 1990s, Greenland was losing about 25 billion tons of ice per year. Now, it's losing around 234 billion tons per year. That's nearly 10 times more ice melting away each year. According to NASA, if all of Greenland's ice sheet were to melt, it would increase global sea levels by about 24 feet. That could be catastrophic for coastal countries and cities around the world. The Netherlands could be submerged, the Bahamas could be almost completely wiped out, and many of the Philippines Islands would be at risk of disappearing. All of this may seem like a distant reality, and it is true that most scientists believe it would take several hundred or even thousands of years for the ice sheet to melt completely. But it is important to know that Greenland didn't always have this thick layer of ice. Very recently, researchers took a close look at some sediment from the bottom of a 2-mile deep ice core extracted from the center of Greenland. They found that the soil had traces of willow wood, insect parts, fungi, and even poppy seeds. So these fossils are the first direct evidence that Greenland's ice sheet melted away in the recent geological past, around 400,000 years ago. At that time, Greenland was home to a green tundra landscape with insects and plants. This discovery is both fascinating and scary because it shows that the ice sheet collapsed before and might be more fragile than scientists originally thought. There is another concern too. A recent research collected meltwater from different spots on the Greenland ice sheet and found that the water samples were packed with hundreds and thousands of microbes. The concern is that they could be released into the ocean in the future. And some studies already suggest that areas near where a lot of glacial meltwater flows have a higher risk of viruses jumping to new hosts, like from animals to humans. Even though experts believe the chance of a doomsday virus coming from the glaciers is very small, it's still not zero. The truth is, we don't know much about the thousands of microbial species living on the surface of the ice, and there is simply not enough data to fully understand how dangerous these organisms might be. All of this might sound concerning, but we shouldn't panic just yet. There's still a lot we don't understand about what is darkening the Greenland ice sheet. We still need more detailed measurements of the relative abundance of dust, algae, and black carbon, as well as a better understanding of how these potentially dangerous microbes could affect our lives. The more we learn, the better we can predict what's going to happen and how we can prepare for it. The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps, much smaller in size and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learn to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny. But at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's fresh water, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process.
Now, the next time you travel the world on Google Maps, check out this lake in Finland that is shaped just like the country itself. This lake was modified by humans in the north of the country and is an exact model of the country on a 1 to 10,000 scale. In the 1980s, Arctic tourism and skiing above the Arctic Circle was booming. A local company decided to build a hotel and plenty of holiday cabins here. The pond, shaped like Finland, was supposed to bring more tourists to the area. They managed to finish it in just 1 week with 2 excavators, a tape measure, and a few sticks. And I must say, they did a great job. If you don't like long elevators, head to Hanover, Germany. One of the outdoor elevators there only travels for a few inches, and the whole experience takes a few seconds. It has become a real star on social media after some tourists posted footage of it, so you might have to wait in line to enjoy your short ride. In case you're wondering what's the point of this elevator, well, it's installed at the local train station. Every inch counts when you're traveling with heavy luggage or have limited mobility, so it's a good way to navigate within the station. Gummy bear fans, you might want to know that your favorite chewy treat has enough energy in it to start a fire shell. If you drop 1 gummy bear into an ignition tube with a small amount of molten potassium or sodium chlorate in it, it will quickly disappear in a ball of fire with an impressive fume cloud. First, potassium chlorate melts. Then the melted potassium chlorate breaks down and releases oxygen. The sugar in the gummy bear burns quickly, turning into carbon dioxide in water, which gives off a lot of energy. After everything cools down, you can look at what's left. The black stuff is unburned carbon, the white solid is potassium chloride, and the caramel-looking stuff is partially burned sugar. So we only have 6 muscles in our outer ear, and cats have an impressive 32. That's why they can rotate their ears 180 degrees and use them to show their current mood. If you see the ears are upright and facing forward, you have one happy cat. If the ears are rotated to the sides, sort of like airplane wings, or angled backward, your kitty must be really stressed or afraid of something. Ears held low or rotated to the sides could be a sign the cat is sick, so watch out for those. A stray dog in Brazil got a job as a professional car consultant at a local Hyundai dealership. The company manager noticed a stray pup next to the dealership and started leaving food and water for his new friend. Other staff members also fell in love with the pup and finally decided to adopt him. The doggy got a home, a job, and the name Tucson, after Hyundai's popular compact SUV. Tucson's job includes wearing a tie, getting behind the wheel, and winning over the hearts of customers. You can see from the company's social media that he excels at all these tasks. In Mexico, they like to spice up mango and citrus fruits with salt and chili pepper. You can try mango with a shrimp taste in the Philippines and salted watermelon in the southern states. When you're eating a sweet fruit sprinkled with salt, you'll notice the salty flavor with the first bite, and the sweet fruity taste follows a bit later. And when you get used to it, it feels as juicy and amazing as ever. It's most likely because salt affects the sweet taste receptor for sugar, and then the real magic happens on a molecular level. You can try and put salt on any fruit you like, but the effect will be different. Salt can make sweeter fruits like cherries and strawberries even sweeter and balance the flavor of grapefruit, pineapple, and watermelon. Now, back in 1956, long before the first dating apps were a thing, or apps in general, a Swedish sailor named Ake Viking decided to ask the sea for help to find a soulmate. He put a short message to someone beautiful and far away in a bottle and let it travel the world. 2 years later, he received a reply from a girl named Paulina from Sicily. She wrote that she wasn't really beautiful, but she thought it was super cool that the bottle had covered such a huge distance. That's why she decided to let the sender know she had found it. Well, they became pen pals, and after a while, you guessed it, Viking moved to Sicily to marry his one and only Paulina. That unique pattern on your fingertips stays with you for your entire life. If you happen to damage your fingerprints somehow, or develop some skin condition that can change them, they'll still grow back within a month. As you grow older, the skin on your fingertips becomes less elastic and the ridges get thicker, but the pattern still doesn't change. It just becomes harder to scan. If you work as a bricklayer, though, or have to handle certain chemicals, you might lose some details in your beautiful natural pattern. But no worries, once you stop doing those activities, you'll get your fingertips back. Unless maybe you're a meat cutter. If you still believe in the 5-second rule, there's some bad news for you. When your food hits the floor, it instantly becomes a bacteria magnet. Researchers discovered that moisture, surface type, and contact time all play a role in how badly contaminated your food will get. Food with high moisture levels, like juicy watermelon, are more likely to get in trouble fast. In a different study, researchers swabbed the floors around the University of Illinois in a lab, hall, dormitory, and cafeteria to see how many organisms they could find. Even on dry, sterile surfaces, germs relocated onto cookies and gummy bears in less than 5 seconds. For some foods, it took less than 1 second for the transfer to begin. The first Barbie doll was made in 1959, but her great-great-great-grandmother comes from ancient Rome. Archaeologists found some incredible sarcophagi during construction work in Rome in the 19th century. One of those had a 9-inch-long doll next to its owner. The head and body were made from a single piece of ivory. Its arms and legs were separate and connected with a clever nail mechanism, allowing them to move. Its face was so detailed that it looked like a tiny portrait. The doll even wore a tiny gold ring with a key on its finger and had a small ivory box full of jewels, tiny mirrors, bone combs, and the remnants of accessories. But Ken was nowhere to be found. In case you're looking for a new job and you love to cuddle, there might be an opening for you. As weird as it sounds, a professional snuggler is a real job. There are several companies that provide cuddling services and look for staff members who are ready to give hugs and snuggles and listen and support people who really need it. Now, anyone can give hugs to others, but you need to be trained in professional cuddling to make money out of it. You will need to learn to set boundaries with your future clients without hurting their feelings and to mentally care for others without giving away too much of your own personality. Famous scientist Nikola Tesla knew that the whole world would go wireless back in 1900. He mentioned that devices no larger than a watch would be able to transfer signals precisely. Back then, it was a revolutionary idea the scientist got while conducting experiments at one of his labs. Tesla was so confident about the success of his idea that he even convinced famous banker J.P. Morgan to invest money in his project. The World Wireless System involved a tower shaped like a mushroom on the shores of Long Island. It was supposed to transmit messages, phone calls, and images to ships across the Atlantic Ocean. Sadly, because of financial issues, the tower was never finished. Oh well, it all turned out now, didn't it?
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylasolio. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future.
Hey now, get ready to dive into the Sea of Mysteries, also known as the Black Sea. It is the largest inland body of water in the world, bigger than the entire state of California. It has dozens of lost ships and some secret underwater tunnels. And some people believe it's an ancient quarry that was mined out in 6 stages. The Black Sea has distinct vertical layers that don't mix, with higher and lower salinity. The salty water comes from the Mediterranean, and fresh water comes from rivers. 10 of the largest rivers in Europe flow into the Black Sea. It receives more fresh water from the rivers and rainfall than it loses from evaporation. The extra water flows through the Bosphorus into the Marmara Sea, There are two flows going through the straits. The upper flow leaves the Black Sea and takes surface water out of it. The bottom flow carries salt water from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's why the upper layers of the Black Sea are less dense than its saltier lower layers. The oxygen that comes from the atmosphere and photosynthesis stays in the surface layers. Everything deeper than about 300 feet in the middle and up to 500 feet near the edge is not fit for life. Only certain bacteria can survive in these conditions. Although there's no air deep down in the Black Sea, the upper layer is home to around 750 species of phytoplankton. Eggs and larvae of fish and invertebrates chill in coastal regions. There are also 180 fish species in the Black Sea, and some of them are valuable, such as horse mackerel, spiny dogfish, and sprat. The water level in the Black Sea is always the same because there are no high or low tides, so the sea is always calm, quiet, and serene on the surface. But it has one surprise feature: an underwater river. It's a current of salty water flowing through the Bosphorus Strait and along the seabed. This amazing discovery was made by scientists from the University of Leeds and was announced in 2010. It's the first undersea river of its kind ever found. The river forms because salty water from the Mediterranean Sea spills through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, where the water is much less salty. The no-air zone of the sea is an ideal conservation chamber for what's hiding on its bottom. The Black Sea is like a treasure trove for shipwrecks, and we discovered it by accident. Some maritime archaeologists were studying sea levels to see how quickly the water levels rose after the last ice age, and they ran across over 40 previously unknown shipwrecks as a complete bonus. Researchers used two remotely operated vehicles to explore the seafloor and the wrecks. Thanks to it, we have a video and detailed 3D images of the ships that were stitched together from thousands of high-resolution photos. According to the New York Times, some of the standout discoveries among the 44 ships found include a medieval training vessel from the 13th or 14th century. Expedition members nicknamed another ship from the Ottoman Empire the Flower of the Black Sea for its beautiful petal carvings. The team also noticed unusual details on other ships, like coiled ropes, chisel marks, rudders, and other carvings. So far, they haven't announced any plans to excavate the shipwrecks, but the ships might be filled with historical treasures like books, parchments, and documents. It's worth a try to rescue them. The most extraordinary discovery in the Black Sea is what archaeologists believe to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. It has been lying undisturbed for over 2,400 years. This ancient Greek vessel, 75 feet long, was found with its mast, rudders, and rowing benches all still in place, over a mile beneath the surface. Researchers believe the ship was a trading vessel, like those depicted on ancient Greek pottery, such as the Siren vase in the British Museum. This vase, or vase, dating from the same period, shows a vessel carrying Odysseus past the Sirens. The team took a small piece for carbon dating, and the results confirmed it as the oldest intact shipwreck known to humankind. The fact that it's so elaborate and well-preserved deserves a standing ovation for shipbuilders of the ancient world. Without microbes, worms, or other creatures to eat away the wrecks, it's no wonder the ships are in almost perfect condition. If the Titanic had sunk in these waters, we would have found it in a much better state now, not being eaten by nasty underwater microorganisms. Now, there's an interesting theory called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, which suggests a huge flood happened around 7,500 years ago. Two geologists in the 1990s suggested that at the end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate was heating up, ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising. The Black Sea was a much smaller freshwater lake. It was separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean overflowed into the Black Sea basin. They suggest the sea level rose by 6 inches every day, flooded coastal settlements, and changed the environment for good. Samples from the Black Sea floor show a sudden shift from freshwater to marine species around that time, which means there was a rapid influx of salt water. Underwater surveys have also found what look like the old shorelines and human-made structures. So, people were living in areas now submerged by the Black Sea. Plus, the timing of this flood matches up with known patterns of human migration into Europe, Asia, and Africa. They also say this flood could be the terrible flood from the story of Noah's Ark. Critics of the deluge theory say the evidence isn't as straightforward as it seems. Some think the transition from freshwater to saltwater in the Black Sea was more gradual than one sudden flood. They're also debating if people left the settlements before they went underwater or as a result. An old chronicle that's been around for about a century says there were 2 underground tunnels starting in what is now Romania and Bulgaria and stretching all the way under the Black Sea to Turkey. Back in the day, peasants used these tunnels to move their flocks of sheep to the Ottoman Empire and countries on the Asia Minor Peninsula. Who built these tunnels and why they run under the sea is a complete mystery. At some point, the entrances to these tunnels were sealed off for national security and were under tight guard. The security forces knew all about these massive tunnels and kept them off limits. In the 1980s, a group of people working on the Danube-Black Sea Canal accidentally found another entrance to these mysterious tunnels. This one was in a cemetery in a town of Romania. Canal workers used it to regularly cross over into Bulgaria. One more cool thing about these 2 tunnels is that some people think they were built thousands of years ago. If you ever try to dig a tunnel under the sea, you'll know how tricky it is even now with all the tech we have. So if the tunnels are really that old, whoever built them was super advanced for their time. Now, there's an urban legend that says that the Black Sea has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle. Fishers describe some wild whirlpool that appears out of nowhere and drags entire flocks of birds, ships, and even small islands under the sea. And once, things got even wilder with a ship that vanished under weird conditions in 1944. It was during daylight, and some black fog with green flashing sparkles suddenly surrounded the vessel. No one has ever seen it since, and no one knows for sure if the story is true. But it sure adds a spooky touch to the mysteries of the Black Sea. So a team of archaeologists digging in the far north of Zambia stumbled upon something that could change all we know about early humans. Was it a Walkman? Nah. It's a wooden structure built around 500,000 years ago, the oldest of its kind on Earth. The construction consists of 2 logs that had been shaped to fit together, something like Lincoln logs, those toy building sets. There's no chance that the 2 logs could have just drifted along the river and merged in that shape naturally. They were carved with sharp tools before Homo sapiens, or modern humans, appeared in Africa. Researchers don't know which species of ancient humans could manage to create something like this, but they were pretty great at planning and maybe even used some language to discuss their construction projects. It also means we can't be so sure that Stone Age folks were just wandering nomads. They might have been more settled down than we thought, with enough resources to stick around in one place. Finding wooden stuff from the Stone Age is like looking for a needle in a haystack, because it decomposes over time, much like Beethoven. But this one was found near Colombo Falls, near the border of Zambia and Tanzania. The construction might have been a walkway, a firewood or food storage spot, or a base for shelter. It was preserved so well in waterlogged sediments that have no oxygen and kept the construction fresh. The discovery has marks left from tools that were used to make the 2 pieces fit together. Archaeologists also dug up 4 ancient wooden tools at a site: a wedge, a digging stick, a chopped log, and a branch with a notch, all dated back to over 300,000 years ago. Scientists analyzed minerals in the sand around the goodies they found and used a technique called luminescence dating to tell the age of the finds. Experts believe that they should study more waterlogged sites because they could have more examples of ancient woodworking. Archaeologists have to be really careful while working with these finds not to damage the delicate wood, so they use plastic tools. The team that found the construction had to keep the wood wet so it wouldn't lose traces of human activity or break. They took it to the UK to study in special tanks for underwater photography. There, they made 3D models of the wood. The earliest wooden artifact found so far is a piece of polished plank from Israel, which is over 780,000 years old. There were also some wooden tools for foraging aged 400,000 years, but none of these finds are as progressive as the wooden construction in Africa. Scientists found cotton fibers from the ancient Near East that are 7,000 years old, the oldest of their kind. The place where they were found is like a time capsule, with mud brick buildings with all sorts of ancient goodies, giving us a peek into what life was like back then. They've already found signs of ancient parties with spots for stashing food. Usually, stuff from this era turns to dust, but thanks to fancy microscopes, experts can dive deep into the sediment collected from the site and uncover all sorts of organic remnants, including these cotton threads. People used to think the fabrics here were made from local plants, but it looks like this cotton might have traveled all the way from the Indus region, which is modern-day Pakistan. The ancient village of Tel Saf might have been more connected than we thought, part of some international trade network. There's more evidence backing up this idea, like beads from Anatolia, Romania, and Egypt, and pottery from other countries. The oldest known leather shoe that was found so far was waiting for 5,500 years in a cave in present-day Armenia. A British archaeologist stumbled upon this gem under a busted jar at the bottom of a pit. Alongside the shoe was a deer's shoulder blade, wild goat horns, a fish vertebra, and some scattered pottery shards. The shoe itself is pretty simple, made from a single piece of cowhide wrapped around the right foot, held together with a leather lace running through eyelets. To keep its shape, they stuffed some grass inside. Scientists are not sure who rocked this shoe, but they use radiocarbon dating to figure out its age along with the grass stuffing. These shoes look a lot like the ones folks still wear today on Ireland's Aran Islands. The same tech and methods used to make these shoes stuck around in Europe until the middle of the 20th century. Near Leipzig, diggers found a grave from about 2,500 years before the current era, packed with over 100 dog teeth, all lined up neat and tidy. These teeth could have been a part of a fancy flap for a handbag. The leather or fabric that was holding it together must have disappeared over centuries. If it's true, that would be the oldest purse in the world, all the way from the Stone Age. Using dog teeth and hair ornaments and necklaces for both women and men was, trendy back then, according to experts. Whoever was the owner of the purse must have had a high social status, judging by the number of materials used to make it, not counting all the toothless dogs. It looks like the oldest musical instruments ever crafted by humans are ancient flutes made of bird bone and mammoth ivory. They were discovered in a cave down south in Germany, a place showing early signs of modern humans settling in Europe. Using carbon dating wizardry, the scientists pinned the flute's age at around 42,000 years old. According to the experts, these musical doodads might have been used for fun or during religious ceremonies. Some experts believe that music might have helped us build bigger social circles and expand our territory compared to the Neanderthals. Those guys faded into history about 30,000 years ago. In 2020, a team of scientists found a string a quarter of an inch long in France. Archaeologists unearthed a cord fragment next to a stone tool. Such twisted fibers could have been used for everything from making clothes to fishing nets. In prehistory, there was some advanced tech, and the Neanderthals seemed to have mastered it. Scientists already knew that these early humans made tar from birch bark and that they produced shell beads. There's even evidence of Neanderthal art. The string section and similar finds prove that our ancestors from many thousands of years ago weren't as primitive as they're often shown in popular culture. Back in the 19th century, the French found a broken slab of black granite from 196 before the current era. The stone contained one text in 3 scripts: ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Demotic. A French philologist was the first to crack the code. He successfully matched the Greek letters with the ones in the Egyptian script, and we were finally able to read hieroglyphs. The name of the piece of granite that made all this possible was the Rosetta Stone. With its help, among other things, scientists managed to decipher papyrus records on how the pyramids in Egypt were built. A British archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, excavated a vast palace complex at Knossos in the early 20th century. This was the center of Minoan culture. The palace had over 1,000 rooms with colorful paintings of dolphins, griffins, and bulls. But their biggest find was at first overlooked: thousands of slabs of baked clay. The fire that brought down the palace helped preserve the tablets. No one could read the slabs as they were in some unknown language. The scientific community had to wait for another half a century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was an English architect and cryptographer who studied Greek and Latin. He found that the script was an archaic form of Greek. It was the oldest deciphered language in Europe, Linear B. During the late Bronze Age, the Greek civilization that used the script vanished.
Around 5.3 million years ago, a crucial event reshaped the Mediterranean region. It was a colossal flood that refilled the local sea, which had been extremely barren and salty up until that point. It got the name Zanclean Flood, and it forever changed the geography of the area. The Mediterranean Sea is surrounded by Europe, Africa, and Asia, and connects to the ocean by the Strait of Gibraltar. This is quite a narrow passage, measuring about 8 miles. It may not be that wide, but the strait plays a crucial role in maintaining the liquid balance between these two bodies of water. About 6 million years ago, a bunch of things might have caused the Mediterranean to be cut off from the Atlantic Ocean. Some say it was an ice age. Others speak of tectonic movements, like earthquakes. Whatever the cause, it pushed the Mediterranean area into a period called the Mycenaean Salinity Crisis. For about 1,000 years, the sea slowly evaporated, leaving behind a dry basin that was several miles below sea level. This crisis really changed the landscape, creating conditions similar to those found in today's Dead Sea. What this means is that the lush Mediterranean beauty used to be a super salty environment, containing nearly 10 times more salt than the ocean. Say you could have visited. You would have been able to effortlessly float on the little water you could find, even if you're not a skilled swimmer. The amount of salt and that mineral content would have made it challenging for most creatures to survive. However, some hardy microorganisms, such as bacteria, could have adapted to these harsh conditions. These days, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, we can find holes as large as the Grand Canyon, and they seem to have formed during that same period of dehydration. Evidence suggests that massive rivers, such as the Nile and the Rhone, flowed directly into the Mediterranean back then, leaving behind canyons as they reached the bottom, thousands of feet below the sea level. People had to find some sort of explanation back in the day for the drying of the Mediterranean, so they came up with myths and legends. One such tale was told by the people of southern Iberia, in modern-day Spain and Portugal. It was also recounted by a famous Roman writer called Pliny the Elder. What this legend said was that the Mediterranean used to be cut out from the ocean until the hero Hercules, with his mighty sword, carved a path. He did so between a fictional location in modern-day Africa and the Rock of Gibraltar. This allowed the ocean waters to flow in, transforming the Mediterranean into what we know today. Some fossils also seem to confirm the unusually large flood. Remains of marine organisms were found in layers high above current sea levels. This means the areas were once submerged underwater. These fossils belong to mollusks, fish, and marine mammals. Because of modern techniques, we now have at least an estimated timing of the Zanclean flood. Scientists used computer simulations to reconstruct the event, providing further evidence that it was real. What they also discovered is that there's a possibility the Mediterranean might change once more. The Strait of Gibraltar could close, most likely because of movements deep under the ground. This could lead to the Mediterranean becoming dry again, over a span of about 1,000 years. The Mediterranean area could disappear altogether if the African continent keeps shifting north too, getting closer to Europe. Another one of those famous yet still a bit hypothetical large floods is called the Black Sea Deluge theory. Some scientists think that around 8,400 years ago, water from the Mediterranean might have spilled over into the Black Sea through a narrow passage called the Bosporus Strait. This could have caused a massive disaster, forcing people living near the Black Sea to pack up their things and move further inside the continent, in both Europe and Asia. Along with them, they might have carried stories about this colossal flood. The specialist that came up with this idea also suggested that these migrating people might have brought along new ways of farming. Not everyone from the scientific community is convinced, though. Some argue that while there might have been a flood, it likely happened earlier and was way smaller. They didn't think this flood could have caused, for example, the story of Noah's Ark. In this legend, a spiritual man was warned by a higher entity that a giant flood was on its way. The man went to gather pairs of animals and pack them all in a boat to make sure these species would survive the devastating flood. There was also the concern among scholars that discussing real floods and ancient stories too much might blur the lines between science and fiction. There may be other reasons why these flood stories are so often found across different cultures all over our planet. One idea is that floods were incredibly destructive for early farmers, so they invented myths about them signaling the end of the world. Another idea is that people stumbled upon ancient sea creature fossils in unusual places, leading them to believe there was a significant flood in the past. The solution to future floods, though, might be floating cities. As sea levels continue to rise, coastal cities like Amsterdam, New Orleans, and Venice may go under. So, floating infrastructure may be the way to go, with buildings that can rise with the water levels, making them able to resist extreme weather too. Countries like the Netherlands, which have a history of managing water risks, are pioneering these floating creations. With cities running out of space for expansion, we might be forced to move on water anyway. By moving on the water, we can reduce crowding and create more interesting ways to feed ourselves, like floating gardens. These homes also come with great alternatives to our energy needs through systems that use solar and wind power. Not to mention that these homes might turn out to be cheaper in the long run. One such floating city might pop up soon in the Maldives. Its goal is to host up to 20,000 people and will feature places to live and eat, but also shops and schools. Designed to look like coral, the region will include canals placed between some 5,000 floating pieces of land. The city will be constructed using modular units, put together in a construction site nearby. After they're completed, they'll be towed to the floating city. The next step is to secure them to a large underwater concrete hull, which is screwed tightly to the seabed on some steel stilts. All these pieces of construction let the modular units easily move as naturally as the sea. Even for those that are afraid of seasickness, there's a solution. That's what the nearby coral reef is for. It will surround the city, making a natural wave breaker. Human-made coral banks will also be placed underneath the city, which will also help coral grow naturally. The long-term goal is to make the establishment self-sufficient. It will have electricity, mostly from on-site solar power. Waste will be treated nearby and reused as plant fertilizer. Instead of air conditioning, the city will use deep-sea water cooling. This method pumps cold water from the deep sea to cool the area, saving energy. Earth is not the only planet that's seen some serious floods. In ancient times, Mars seems to have experienced them too, and they played an important role in shaping its surface. Recent research reveals that billions of years ago, Mars was heavily affected by some serious river flooding, which contributed to the formation of its valleys and canyons. The reason for these floods was heavy rainfall, which reshaped the Martian landscape in a jiffy, at times even within days or weeks. Unlike Earth, where rivers form pretty slowly, Mars experienced rapid changes because of these floods, particularly around 4 billion years ago. We've known for quite some time that there have been floods on Mars, but this